Chapter 31. The Bloody Citadel, 2/3. The corpse golem's attack patterns were simple. Launch corpse bombs at distant enemies and pull nearby enemies in to devour them using the hundreds of tentacle-like arms that sprouted all over its body. Bjorn. Hearing Einar's worried cry, I kept my distance. If I got close enough, I wouldn't be seen as a target for a body bomb anymore, but... So the new target would be the sorceress. Slam. I had to buy time somehow, at least until the sorceress came to. Which meant I had to attract his attention myself. Slam. Each time a corpse bomb flew toward me, I rolled to the side to increase my distance, then crouched behind the shield to protect myself from the acidic bodily fluids. And after doing this about 3 times, I heard no Hindar, purifying flames appeared. Luckily, the mage seemed to have recovered. I didn't need to look back to confirm this and focused my attention solely on the corpse golem. With the screams of hundreds of people, the corpse golem's body caught fire and its carapace began to disintegrate. My original plan of playing cat and mouse with him, closing the distance between us and then retreating to burn the monster's body with a torch, was accomplished with a single magic spell. The outer skin of the corpse golem has been nullified, but the smell of burning, decomposing corpses was clearly too much for her to bear. Bleg. I heard another episode of vomiting begin behind me. Please, get a grip soon. Anyway, I didn't need a sorceress anymore. Einar, everything is all right now. Come closer to me. I immediately called Einar. The corpse golem was a level 7 monster, but now that its skin had been removed, it was a monster that 2 barbarians could overcome. Quo. Its enormous body had shrunk considerably and was now only about 3 meters in diameter. Now that the mounds of living corpses had been burned and melted, only its skeleton, shaped like iron bars, remained. It moved with a creaking sound. He entered golem bone mode. Kaya. Due to its reduced weight, it was much more agile. As I used my shield to block the golem's arm swinging violently at me, I yelled behind me. Porter, you have to help too. I must protect Mrs. Raven. Damn it, I thought. That's what I expected you to say. Just wait, I'll make my hard work pay off right now. Smack. I jumped high and struck the monster's upper body with the mace. There was a shattering sound, but that was all. The ribs were so hard that only a small piece of bone broke off. But now I just needed to do it repeatedly. Einar, aim for the chest. Okay. Einar and I attacked the corpse golem's ribs, drawing and distributing, aggro, 1 hit at a time. After about 40 strikes, its ribs, which had previously been as hard as nutshells, shattered, revealing the almond inside. It was its mana essence, a golem's weak point. Crunch. After breaking its core with a mace, the corpse golem stopped moving and transformed into light. You killed a corpse golem. Express +3. The reward was a mana stone the size of a fist, fitting for a rank 7 monster. Oh, that makes so many loaves of bread. Einar, who had been admiring the size of the mana stone, suddenly froze. That was because the reward wasn't limited to just 1 stone. Whoom. A halo of black light began to glow in the air. Bjorn, is this? I gave a slight nod. It was an essence. The rift was no different from a treasure mine. Exclusive monsters that did not appear on the regular map were precious opportunities for adventurers who otherwise could not receive more experience points, not to mention the loot that could be obtained from the Guardian. Well, the main point was that the rate at which essences were being dropped here was exponentially higher. In fact, statistically, it's strange that an essence has only appeared now. What are you going to do? Einar's question forced me to concentrate. We were the rightful owners of the essence. We too practically defeated the monster single-handedly, to begin with, and that had been the agreement from the start anyway. However, initially, I was after 2 specific prizes, the regenerative power of a death demon and the strength of a chimera wolf. Both were essences of rank 8 monsters. However, in the process of pursuing this goal, the essence of a corpse golem, which could only be obtained by defeating an elite level 7 monster in the Bloody Citadel, had now appeared before me. The sheer difficulty of obtaining this rare essence was incomparable to the other 2 prospects. But it was too early to celebrate. The penalty for this item was as severe as its unique effects were great. Corpse golem. Pain tolerance +70. Bone strength +55. Poison resistance +12. Strength +15. Perception -5. Appetite +9. Weight +21. First, the basic attributes were adequate for a tank. The drop in perception would affect the user's vision and reaction time, and their general senses would become more sluggish. But in return, their other attributes would greatly increase. Bone strength, which affected defense as much as physical resistance, was +55, and weight, which affected recoil and blunt damage in the game, was +21. Pain resistance would also be very useful in the real world, and appetite was an attribute that would be 100% useful along with strength and poison resistance. But, specials. P. Acid fluid. The blood becomes acidic. A. Flesh explosion. A powerful explosion originating from a part of the body. The active skill was the only flaw. The flesh explosion caused a high amount of damage, but the character paid the price in HP. Could I just use the passive ability? Sealing a skill was not only a huge loss, but by consuming that essence, the durability of your equipment would be drastically reduced every time you got hurt because your acidic blood would fall on it. Phew. From the exorbitant cost of the potion to the cost of the equipment, it was an essence that was both useless and useful. Normally, when this essence appeared in the game, I would give it to the NPC I was carrying with me, intending to discard it. It was a waste to throw it away, but too risky to give it to the main character. But the essences you consume at the beginning have to be discarded eventually anyway, so getting this now wouldn't be a bad idea. Let's put this away for now and take care of the dwarf first. Even without an owner, the essence could last 30 minutes, so there was no need to make an impulsive decision. I could even use it to strike a deal. Having reached that conclusion, I turned around and witnessed a scene that was nothing short of a mess. Had the bearer given him a potion? The dwarf was writhing in pain from the potion, and for some reason, the sorceress also seemed to be on the verge of death. Don't come any closer. His name was Tarzine, I think. That rude, wretched bodyguard was now in our way despite not having done anything the whole time. Shit, what have we done? Why is she like this? I asked from a distance. She's suffering from the rebound effect of using too much magic, the bearer replied. Rebound? Huh, he seemed to be referring to a short circuit, a condition that sometimes occurred when an attempt to cast a spell failed. On closer inspection, she was literally vomiting blood, not just her dinner. Garg. Could this have happened because she used magic while her stomach was rejecting the smell? That was ridiculous to me, but it was definitely plausible for Dungeon and Stone. Unlike other games, where cause and effect are usually very clear, in this game, a seemingly insignificant cause could be fatal. Are you just going to stand there? It would be better to move her out of the room, I said. Please take care of the dwarf here. After escorting Raven and the dwarf back to the underground prison and waiting a while, their condition began to improve. However, the dwarf was the first to wake up. What a shame, thank you. We would have been in trouble if it weren't for the two of you. I'm glad you realized that. There was no reason to act humbly. It wasn't as if I was going to gain anything from it. It was true that I had made a significant contribution and, using that as leverage, I was planning to increase my salary. To do that, it would be better to inflate our value. If it weren't for Aner, you'd already be dead. I know, it's embarrassing to admit, but as soon as I saw the monster, my body froze. Until now, I thought I'd seen everything in this world. Once again, it dawned on me that this place was real. If this were a game, we would have had more than enough manpower to kill that monster, but, for psychological reasons, these people were almost killed by a mid-level sub-boss who wasn't even a guardian. But what happened to this lady? It seems like a rebound. But she already took a potion, so she'll get better soon. After drinking the potion, the sorceress, who had gone from vomiting to screaming, regained consciousness just 10 minutes later. I see I've caused an inconvenience. She feigned being fine when she opened her mouth, but she no longer had any aristocratic air about her. The corners of her lips and neck were stained with vomit and blood, and even her beautiful blonde hair was loose and dirty. Her shimmering robes were also a mess from rolling on the floor. We took care of the corpse golem. Yes, I know, I'm glad I cast that spell, even with the cost it made me feel. Was this the habit of all those foolish adventurers? To mention their own achievements without saying thank you? If I didn't speak up now, I knew it would be impossible to get a raise. I needed to secure proof. We saved them. You could argue we did more than our share. Do you agree, Mage? I agree. Raven nodded as if she didn't want to admit it. It seemed quite embarrassing to her that the two barbarians she had ignored had accomplished such a great feat. To be honest, it was actually quite satisfying, but allowing some breathing room now would help in the negotiations. Of course, your magic was excellent. Such a strong flame. You worked so hard for the good of the team. I did, but, so, what do you want? We will retrieve the Rift Stone, I said frankly. Essence, numbered item, Rift Stone. Those were the 3 loot items a guardian could drop. When I first asked for the Rift Stone, they glared at us, called us greedy, and said they didn't need 2 barbarians anyway. But now, things were different. There was an awkward silence. I waited patiently without pressing. The key to the negotiation was in the waiting. The dwarf expressed his approval first. I accept these terms. If it weren't for this barbaric lady here, I would be dead. So he was returning the favor, right? However, I refuse. Raven wasn't going to agree so easily. However, that didn't mean she wouldn't compromise at all. But if the Rift Stone really does appear, I can at least give you a fair chance. Simply put, this meant she would give us a chance to win the stone. This was a little disappointing, but it was true that her role in this mission was vital. I knew I would have to be satisfied with this outcome, especially since we didn't have much time anyway. Then came the next point of debate. Oh, and it has an essence. An essence. Did the corpse golem drop an essence? That's right. The dwarf and Raven's jaws dropped, surprised that something so difficult to obtain had appeared. Incredible. It seems you haven't managed to get an essence yet. Imagine, this is the first one you've ever gotten. I heard that the essence of a corpse golem is so rare that even the Adventurers Guild doesn't fully understand its abilities. Raven conveyed that the essence of a corpse golem was classified as rarer than the essence of a guardian in terms of rarity. The thirst for knowledge in her eyes was the icing on the cake. Finally, I pulled out the offering I had kept close to my chest the whole time. You can exchange it for the guardian's essence, if you wish. Excuse me, but I'm not sure if the guardian will give us an essence. Raven finished with a strange expression on her face. It seems she liked my suggestion. I will take that risk. Okay then, that's fine by me. I don't know about the other adventurers, but the corpse golem is really more to my interest. I didn't expect such a result, though. With that, the negotiations were finalized. Miss Raven, I've heard that mages can't absorb essences. Will you give that essence to that bearer? No, the essence itself is worth studying. Raven pulled a test tube from the pouch on the bearer's back. This was one of the reasons why mages were such powerful characters. They could carry an essence out of the labyrinth without even absorbing it directly into their bodies. To do this, they needed to prepare one thing, however. Oh, you brought a test tube. I heard that's an exorbitantly expensive item. I only have one too. If you placed the essence of a monster below level 6 in a test tube, it was nearly impossible to store the real thing afterward. However, Raven seemed to value the essence of the corpse golem more than the guardian. Womb. Raven recited a spell, and the essence was drawn into the test tube. She carefully wrapped the box in 2 layers and stored it in her backpack. Let's get out of this terrible place. I was waiting for you to say that. We climbed the sticky ladder and hurried through the large water pipe. The only monsters that appeared were skull rats and the undead. The pipes had a foul odor, but nothing compared to the room where the corpse golem lived. After traveling for about 30 minutes, we arrived at our destination. I'll go up first. There was a staircase beyond a rusty iron fence that we knocked down with a kick. When I climbed up, a spacious stone chamber lay before me. Taking in as much fresh air as I could, I surveyed my surroundings. What is that? It doesn't look like a gargoyle statue. Since I don't sense any mana, it must just be a sculpture. Intimidating demonic figurines were everywhere, and there was a floor littered with human skulls. There must have been a lord's castle right above this chamber. If it hadn't collapsed, I would have been able to investigate inside. As if oblivious to the sinister atmosphere of this place, Raven licked her lips as if they were a feather. It's exactly as I was told. The layout of this room is typical of a place of worship. However, the fact that it's hidden underground means that the religion didn't align with the social sentiments of the time. For example, it could have been a religion that worshipped an evil god. I understand. The dwarf was frightened by Raven's unnecessarily long explanation. I told them both to get back on their guard before the speech got too long. Why don't we stop talking and get ready? Actually, I was talking to myself too. That's because the final stage of the rift, the open black lens bracket demon worship room close black lens bracket, was not a place to be taken lightly. Bjorn, I have a bad feeling about this. Especially for an unlucky person like me. Chapter 32. The Bloody Citadel, 3/3. Open hollow corner bracket translator. Mr. Rhodey close hollow corner bracket. Grr. When Raven pushed a stone against the wall, the candles in the stone chamber lit up at once, illuminating the interior of the hall. Oh, how did you know that? Books are a treasure trove of knowledge. Why can't she just say she read it in a book? Let's see. Ah, here's another one. Raven pushed another stone, and after a mechanical click, a book fell from the ceiling, the Necronomicon. It was a book of black magic and an item sold at a rather high price. Drug. Since I found this on my own, I'll keep it as agreed. That's right, it's something we can take without distortion magic anyway. Ha ha ha. Raven laughed uncomfortably. Of course she already knew that. The Necronomicon was considered an item, so it could be taken out of the rift even without distortion magic. Would you mind putting this in my backpack? Yes, Lady Raven. It left a bitter taste in my mouth, but all I could do was watch the mage take the loot for herself. Wow, I thought I could retrieve that item myself later. How did she know that, but not what was hidden beneath the statue? Shall we continue then? The corridor we were walking through was about 9 meters wide, and soon we came to a huge demon statue and a fork in the path. Miss Raven, it doesn't matter which path we choose. We're going to hunt all of the monsters along the way anyway, right? We circled around a rectangular room dedicated to demon worship and took down the monsters one by one. The monsters that appeared were gargoyle statues, death demons, chimera wolves, and bone knights. We were very lucky in many ways. The fact that we managed to get the essence of a corpse golem was already a stroke of luck, but these also happened to be knights of the nostalgia type. In stark contrast to my usual state of affairs, luck continued to be on our side. The Bone Knight, a level 7 monster, had one of 3 random attributes: hate, sadness, or longing. And we were getting the easiest and most rewarding type of all. The longing type only has the vitality absorption ability, which restores its health after an injury. And that can be easily cancelled by my wound exacerbation spell, Raven boasted proudly, but the fact was that with or without her, the longing type knight was the easiest to deal with. The bone knight of the sadness type emitted a hallucinogenic mist, which was a very annoying ability even in the game. However, not even that could compare to the hate type. That would be lucky, the dwarf argued. But I've heard that the hate type monster is the weakest. Nonsense. Knights of Hatred possessed the soul slash ability, an insane skill that didn't deal physical damage but reduced the target's level by a terrifying amount. Companion A suffered severe damage to their soul. Their level decreased. After the skill was used, these battle logs would appear, whether it was about HP, defense, or magic resistance. And when this log appeared, it was easier to simply start over with a new character, much easier than recovering lost experience points by working hard to open portals. A decrease in the dignity of the soul, how awful. At Raven's explanation on my behalf, the dwarf shuddered and let out a sigh of relief. However, the sorceress did not miss the opportunity to further demonstrate her knowledge and continued to explain. Oh, also, if you possess as many essences as your soul can hold, one will be lost randomly. This is probably something other adventurers don't know. As was typical of a mage, she only spoke the truth. However, if I could add one thing as a pro, Soul Slash was more effective against lower level characters, and my current level was only 2. Furthermore, given my streak of bad luck, I was extremely fortunate not to have encountered a Knight of Hate. It has an essence. Wow, could my luck finally be improving? Despite having defeated only a few monsters, an essence belonging to none other than the level 7 Bone Knight emerged. What the heck? First came the corpse golem, and now, am I in some kind of special event? It seems like God is watching over you too. Ha ha ha, I agree. Perhaps this means that the Guardian's essence will also appear. They sent vaguely reminiscent words of congratulations to my side. But there was an unspoken question in their comments, and that was which of us would consume the essence, me or Aner. After a moment to think, I made a difficult decision. Aner, you take this. Is everything alright? It would be a lie to say I didn't want to. In truth, the Guardian was the only remaining boss monster, and no one could guarantee that another essence would appear. However, you said you wanted to get stronger, right? So, take this. From a player's perspective, it made more sense for Aner to pick this up instead of me. Vitality absorption was a good combination for someone wielding a sword, and I would have to get rid of my weapon eventually. Above all, Aner was trustworthy. Given her honorable personality, I knew she would stand by my side. So, instead of being impulsive, it would be more efficient to use Aner's newfound strength to acquire an essence that would be better suited to me. Thank you, Bjorn, you're the best. I'll definitely return the favor. With my permission, Aner eagerly took the essence. The change was dramatic and immediate. Wow, you all suddenly got taller. You're the one who got smaller, Aner. What, is that true? Aner, who used to be about 1.96 meters tall, shrank. In an instant, his height dropped to just under 1.80 meters. This is a basic side effect of using the essence of a Bone Knight. As bone density increases significantly, height decreases proportionally. Raven, who liked to explain things, was now reciting information about the natural laws of the world. However, if you weren't interested in expressing things in terms of height, medium, low, etc., the exact numbers would look something like this. Bone Knight, cutting power, plus 1-2. Bone density, plus 5-5. Agility, plus 1-5. Resistance, plus 1-5. Flexibility, minus 7. Height, minus 25. P. Antiseptic. Effects that increase the severity of injuries, poison, bleeding, decomposition, etc. are reduced by half. A. Vitality absorption. Temporarily increases the user's healing factor when attacking a living creature. Don't worry, you haven't lost muscle mass just because you've gotten shorter. I'm ruined. No one will see me as a warrior. Everyone already looks at me with disdain because I'm a woman. Does she look down on you because you're a woman? Does she have an inferiority complex? By the way, you look very beautiful now, Raven murmured, even witnessing Aner's despair as if it were relevant now. Is it because your bone structure shrunk? Perhaps this essence could be sold to nobles for cosmetic purposes. That means I don't look like a warrior anymore. I didn't realize she was going to take it so seriously. I rushed to fix things. No, Aner, everyone knows you're a great warrior. To be honest, except for the tattoos on her upper body, she kind of just looked like a tall human woman now. What's wrong with being a little shorter? This is not a little bit. But you're so much stronger. Doesn't that make up for it? I had to be the one to comfort her. The rest of those people were sociopaths who were busy using the misfortunes of others to further their own interests. Ha ha ha, what a strange essence. If a dwarf like me were to get my hands on it, he would become invisible. That's an interesting thought. Whether the height reduction is proportional or absolute is something I should research further when I get back. I'm ruined. Ha ha ha, even though you're short, your voice is very loud. Could it be because you're a barbarian? Miss Aner, if it's alright with you, may I conduct some tests on you once we return to the city? I'm ruined. I wanted everyone to just shut up. My ears and head were hurting. A demon of death. The noise thankfully ceased when a monster approached amidst the commotion. However, curious about Aner's transformation after absorbing the essence, everyone stepped back and signaled their intention to observe. Bahella. Aner swung his sword with a lifeless cry. And, va-voom. I hadn't misheard. For the first time, his sword made a cutting sound instead of a bang. Single quote. Could the +1-2 increase in cutoff force have made such a big difference? Aner. Aim for the head. Okay. Startled by her own transformation, Aner leapt high and struck with her sword vertically. At that moment, vroom. The demon of death, which we normally had to strike dozens of times between the two of us, was killed with a single blow. She cut straight through its hard skull and struck its brain. Look, you've gotten much stronger. So, I'm still a warrior. Of course. She looked at me, confused. Aner, second daughter of Fenelon. You are not just a warrior. You are a mighty warrior. Bahella. Thank God. That cheered her up. Her new body would still be strange, but Aner would become much stronger once she got used to it. What a great couple they are. I feel the same way. I ignored the conversation between Raven and the dwarf and continued on. I realized once again that the only way to shut these guys up was to fight some monsters. Come on, Bjorn. If you get some essence too, you can become a stronger warrior like me. Regaining his motivation, Aner fought the battle with all his heart and soul. Smack, smack, clang, va-voom. Unfortunately, even after we finished hunting all the monsters in the prayer room, no additional essence appeared. But I haven't lost hope. The jewel in the rift's crown, the guardian, was still there. If I've been so lucky so far, wouldn't it make sense to wait a little longer? That's what I was thinking about. I had a lot of fun with you all, but now it's coming to an end. The dwarf uttered words that triggered red flags. Raven said the same. What a shame. This is the first time I've ever been in a labyrinth, but I think I can understand why my superiors do this work. Instantly, it sobered me up. Thinking about it, has my life ever been this peaceful? Well, I'm sure this wouldn't be the first time. But the problem was the big events that always followed these periods of tranquility in my life. The loose screws in my head tightened all at once, while a strange and dark sensation enveloped me. I'll go in, then. What could be the problem? What was the worst that could happen? Internal fighting? No, I didn't think that would be it. We had already agreed on the distribution of the loot, and something like that would only become relevant after the guardian died anyway. Creak. Even as the dwarf opened the door to the stone chamber, I studied our surroundings. Certain that something was about to happen, I paid close attention to every little detail I could catch. Furthermore, I reviewed all the information about the bloody citadel that I could remember from the game. And then I found out. Door. Close the door. What do you want to say? Damn, is it too late already? D. The moment the door opened, the ground began to tremble. Violently. Then, in the center of the spacious stone chamber, a dark figure rose and removed its cloak to reveal a pale face. Only the sorceress, Raven, realized the gravity of the situation we were currently in. It can't be. The guardian of the rift had changed. The creature in the room was not the Death Knight who should have been waiting for us here. The Lord of the Bloody Citadel has awakened from a deep sleep. Instead, it was a kind of lone boss, but a monster with a difficulty rating of 5. A true hybrid monster proficient in black magic and melee combat. A monster that could normally only be found, and even then the chances were slim, after the 6th floor. Vampire. And it was a high-ranking mutant, not even an ordinary vampire. In short, the figure before us was a monster intelligently named, with its own name and a history. I even knew his name. You're the first living thing I've seen in a long time. Vampire Duke of Cambormer. Where did you come from? On behalf of the frozen group, I opened my mouth. Run away. Damn it, why are you doing this to me? I had put so much effort into finding him in the game, but he didn't appear even once. Chapter 33. Warrior 1/3. Open hollow corner bracket translator. Mr. Rhodey close hollow corner bracket. Monsters can be broadly classified into 4 categories. 1. Mutants, such as goblinoid archers and swordsmen. The race remained the same, but the class of monsters varied. 2. High-level species. The death demon I encountered in the land of the dead fit into this category. This classification was relative. If the monster's level was higher than the average of the other monsters on the floor, it was considered a high-level species. 3. Rare species. Monsters that could only be found in certain rifts, such as corpse golems, or monsters that were extremely difficult to find on normal maps, such as mimics, fit into this category. 4. High-class mutant. This category referred to named monsters with individual and unique personalities and names. The most important characteristic of these monsters, however, was their ability to use an essence. In short, these monsters were much more difficult and challenging. What would happen if an ogre, known for its thick skin, possessed the healing factor of a troll? An insane monster would be born. That's why I was running with all my might. What the hell is this? Why is there a vampire here? You'd be better off running instead of complaining, dwarf. While we were fleeing the entrance to the boss's office. Huff, huff, I can't run anymore. Excuse me, then, Lady Raven. The messenger took her, running along the path we used to get here, then past the water pipe. We won't get out of here unless we defeat him somehow. Wouldn't it be better to fight? At least we have to get to a place where there is sunlight. All we have for sunlight is a blood-red sky. This is still better than being down here. Even as we entered the labyrinthine underground prison. Turn left here. We continued to run. This place was nothing less than their territory. We had to get out of there somehow. That way, maybe we'd have a chance of survival. A high-class mutant as a guardian, that's unprecedented. Well, that wasn't actually true. A high-level mutant species also served as guardian of the White Temple Rift on the 3rd floor. Furthermore, from the 8th floor upwards, which was classified as a deep floor, it was safe to say that all rifts were like that. Well, it wouldn't be incorrect to say that there was no precedent for this on the 1st floor, though. Even I, a 9-year veteran of this game with 10,000 playthroughs accumulated, had never encountered the Vampire Duke. I only learned of his existence through a recording posted by a player on the game's only community forum. Oh, right, Mr. Bjorn, how did you realize so quickly? You told us to close the door. Did that damn thirst for knowledge of hers really have to be active in a situation like this? Again, run instead of talking. But I'm not running, am I? Well, you're not, but I am. I just had a feeling. Before she could bother me any further, I made an excuse and cut the conversation short. But if I gave a proper answer, it was thanks to the color of the doorknob that I realized something was wrong. In the recording the user sent, that was the only detail different from the usual bloody citadel. When the vampire refused to appear even after I had tried the rift hundreds of times under the same conditions as the user, I wondered if there was a special condition I was missing, so I examined the recorded video and managed to detect it by a hair's breadth. If I hadn't been so preoccupied with my good fortune, would I have noticed before the door opened? Well, I didn't think it was something to think about right now. I see that my guests are very rude. The moment we reached the 2nd floor of the underground prison, the monster appeared. Shish, it was pursuing us in the form of a black mist. This wasn't an active or passive ability that vampires possessed, but one of the dozens of black magic spells he had. Open black lens bracket, vengeful state of mind, close black lens bracket. That's why I hated monsters that used magic. The advantage it gave them was too great. Raven, I immediately called the sorceress from our side. I wanted to ask if she knew how to use solar magic, the natural enemy of vampires. But it turned out to be unnecessary. Everyone, close your eyes. The sorceress had already finished casting a spell. A Hessenbert U, light explosion. It was a support spell typically used to blind opponents within a wide area of effect. Even with my eyes closed, I could clearly feel the sudden, intense flash of light. Beep. When I opened my eyes, ignoring the ringing in my ears, I saw that the black smoke that had been chasing us had disappeared. Praise the sun. The spell had prevented the vampire from using his main original body state combo after the vengeful spirit state. It's safe to say we gained at least 3 minutes. He must have woken up in that worship room not long ago. But, the laws of the universe dictated that with success always came bad news. Bjorn, the sorceress has been hit. What? According to Einar, I saw that Raven was unconscious in the bearer's arms. It appeared she had suffered an internal injury, and blood was dripping from her mouth. What? Did that bastard use some kind of magic? He shouldn't have been able to use attack magic in the vengeful state of mind. Perhaps it's the power of whatever essence he possesses. It could be. In the video I had seen, the player had been eliminated before he could do anything, so it had been impossible to see what kind of monster essence the Vampire Duke had. Several possibilities crossed my mind, but I decided to think about it later. What are you doing? Run. The sorceress knows the way, but she fainted. Don't worry, I know the way. How? I looked at the doubtful dwarf. I memorized it, I said quickly. After being here once. In fact, I had been here hundreds of times. I wanted to find the Vampire Duke, so I'd been in and out of this place more times than I could count. I hadn't expected to see his face here instead of through a monitor, though. Follow me. I stopped accepting questions and took the lead. When the sorceress wakes up later, will she think I'm strange for a barbarian? But what's the problem if she thinks that, anyway? The most important thing now was to get out of here alive. You really memorized the way, exclaimed the dwarf as soon as we reached the first basement floor after running non-stop. You too, is it true that your coming-of-age ceremony was last month? Of course, I told you. Bjorn is a great warrior. A great warrior. He really could be one someday. There was a saying in Korea that a compliment could make even a whale dance, but I wasn't a whale. Please. I wanted him to use that energy to run faster instead of talking. I had been leading for about 2 minutes up to this point. Huff, huff, left, right, forward, forward, right, left, forward, forward. With a mental map in my head and my legs constantly moving, the exit finally came into view. Had it been 3 minutes? I looked back one last time before going up the stairs. Huff, huff. Everyone was out of breath, but there were no stragglers because everyone had good stamina. The problem was that I could see a cloud of black smoke following us. Shish. Perhaps we should have abandoned all our bags. Then we could have kept a little more distance. However, I knew there was no time for regrets now. I wouldn't change a thing. Let's focus on what we can do now. Huff, huff. I accelerated even more, but is he using the original body state? I could hear the sound of something rearranging itself behind me. From here on out, I had nothing left to lose. I jumped 2 or 3 steps at a time with one last burst of speed, and we're out. We finally got off the ground without a single fatality. Honestly, I was worried, but he really didn't follow us, the dwarf murmured, breathless. However, still not entirely relaxed, his gaze was fixed on the stairs leading to the basement. Anyone with a brain would know that we had only bought ourselves a little more time and that none of our problems had really been solved yet. How much time do you think we have? He asked. In response to the dwarf's question, I shrugged as I gazed at the mountain range beyond the castle walls. I didn't know the exact time, but definitely not. It was obvious that the weather wasn't on our side. Soon, that dark red sky would turn completely black. So, we needed to prepare before that happened. What exactly is the mage's current state? She drank a potion, so she'll wake up soon. Are you sure? For sure. That's exactly what you've been waiting for, you bastard. This guy had no idea what had happened to her either. This time, you have to do your part too, I said firmly to the bearer. But, no buts. Do you want us all to die here? Sometimes, the most direct statement was the most effective. If we all died, he wouldn't be able to protect the mage alone anyway. What can I do? Actually, not really. I just wanted to make that clear before the battle began. Protect the sorceress, even if it means risking your own life. Of course. His tone shifted to one that was quite confident. Well, that bastard was taken care of, so there was only one more thing left to do to get ready. Let's move to the outer wall. It would be better for us to have some cover. I used a flimsy excuse to lead the group to the outer wall. In reality, the best thing would have been to leave all my things here and take a quick trip alone. But, if he showed up in the meantime, it would be game over. Wait here for a moment. I'll take a look around and be right back. It's not a good idea for us to separate. The dwarf shouted something, but I pretended not to hear and ran to the fountain I had noticed earlier. I had to retrieve the item I had left behind. Bang, shish. The fountain was full of dry pebbles. After breaking the statue in half, I searched through the wreckage and retrieved a small box. The character obtained the item Tears of a Goddess. When I checked inside, the contents of the box matched the game, and more good news followed. Where am I? When I returned after hiding the item in the slit in my boots, Raven had regained consciousness. Vampire. What happened to the vampire? We managed to escape for now, but he'll reappear as soon as the sun sets. I understand. She grimaced, seemingly still in pain. This time, it was my turn to ask questions. What happened to you? Raven took a swig of the potion the bearer gave her as if it were water and replied in a half-dead voice. I'm not sure, but, based on the symptoms, it's very likely pain sharing. Sharing the pain. If that were true, then I would be relieved. The monster possessing this ability, the Knight Templar, had the lowest base attributes of all 8th level monsters. If the essence the vampire had consumed was 6th level, not even 7th level, the difficulty of this encounter would have increased even further. There was a counterattack just as I was about to cast a spell. Raven clutched her chest, a pained expression on her face. The sight made me feel terrible for her. It seemed like it would take some time before she could do her part again. How long will it take for you to recover? A full recovery will be difficult. My circuits are completely fried. A rough estimate is fine, so tell me in numbers. 20 minutes. Then I'll be healed enough for up to 5 7th level attack spells. Only 5 uses of flame baptism. That was really bad. Do you know any other sun spells? You know it's very rude to ask a wizard about the spells they possess. Of course, I knew that was the case in the game's universe. But now, I was a barbarian who came from a culture of being rude to everyone except the king. Raven sighed when I replied with a, so what? Look, I can use a sunspot sphere. A sunspot sphere. At its core, it resembled a fireball, but a sunspot sphere was a 6th level attack spell that used solar properties instead of fire. This might work. Would it be possible for you to use the attribute enhancement spell on top of the sunspot sphere? If I can gather mana for another 10 minutes. Okay, until then, we'll contain it somehow. So, Don't overexert yourself trying to help and save your magic. Yes, I will. Wait, but why are you acting like the leader, Mr. Yandel? A typical sorceress. She was shrewd. The dwarf simply followed while I led. Is there anyone else who can help? Raven looked at the bearer, Aner, and the dwarf in turn, then shook her head, seemingly convinced. That's definitely fair. Haha, I'm sorry, I couldn't help being born a dwarf. The dwarf scratched the back of his thick neck, seemingly embarrassed. Aner, who had been waiting for the right moment to join the conversation, saw this and joined in. Are you suggesting that barbarians are better than dwarves? I'm not. However, as you said, this fellow here is special. I felt it myself, even if only for a brief moment. Special. I may seem like it, but I have a keen eye when it comes to reading people. Raven was obviously curious about what happened while she was unconscious, but unfortunately, she couldn't waste her precious time on that. Murad, how many essences do you have? 4. What types? I kept my questions as short and concise as possible to get a sense of the dwarf's abilities. Among the essences he possessed, there weren't any wild cards that could completely change the game. Still, I managed to devise a strategy in my mind. If there was a problem, however, it was that I didn't have enough time to share this strategy with my teammates. Shish. A cool breeze blew, and the shadows covering the ground grew thicker. 30 minutes remained for preparation. Darkness spreads, terror approaches. Now we had nowhere to retreat to. The only option was to survive, no matter what happened. Chapter 34. Warrior 2/3. Open hollow corner bracket translator. Mr. Rhodey close hollow corner bracket. Bjorn. The moment Aner called my name, the sun, which had been obscured by red clouds, disappeared completely below the horizon. And at that exact moment, a pale-skinned man appeared under the light of the red moon. Strange, very strange. He looked around the city ruins and then fixed his gaze on us. Looking at all of you, I can't suppress my thirst for blood. Do you know why? The reason? Well, how was I supposed to know? And I didn't want to know either. If you give me some time to think about it, maybe I'll remember, I said slowly. I wanted to buy at least one more minute. However, at that moment, the vampire's eyes lit up. My thirst is too unbearable for that. He. To be honest, that was a bit ridiculous. I didn't realize vampires could be so idiotic. Kekaki. Ha ha ha. The vampire, who had suddenly begun laughing as if possessed, stopped as abruptly as he had started. And then, Kaya, he let out a roar that sounded like it came from some otherworldly creature. Spring. His nails, a vampire's primary weapon, extended with a sharp sound. After that, all that remained in his eyes was a madness that cast a reddish glow. It's exactly like in the game. Now that I think about it, it's the same as in the game. No matter how intelligent the monsters were, they always exchanged a few words as a prelude to the fight. I'm already used to fear, said the dwarf. Everyone, retreat. The murderous intent emitted by that level 5 monster was enough to make my body go numb, but surprisingly, the dwarf was completely fine. Actually, I was a little surprised. He looked pathetic in front of the corpse golem, but I guess he was still a third-year adventurer. At the same time that the vampire's physical form disappeared, the dwarf advanced and raised his shield. Bang, bang, bang. A cloud of dust swept past us, carried by a gust of wind. The power behind the blow was obvious even from a few steps away, but... Ha ha ha, how powerful. The dwarf didn't back down in the slightest. It wasn't that his attributes had overpowered the vampire, it was all thanks to the help of an essence. Hikurad Murad launched balanced weight. This was the ability of a level 7 monster called Iron Fangs. It was a push immunity ability that prevented the character from falling or being pushed backward, as long as their feet were touching the ground. Additional variations included shock absorption. Tarzine, stay back. When the battle began, I gave orders. However, I heard nothing in response. When I looked to the side, I saw that the bearer was already far away with the mage in his arms. It was a good decision, but also a little annoying. I decided to revisit that feeling later and shouted, Aner, I'll be on the right side. Thanks to the countless battles we fought together, she could understand what I meant with a single glance. I nodded briefly to the vampire's left, then advanced at the same time as Aner. Kaya, the vampire recoiled. It was clear that his ability to strategize was still intact. At the same time, the dwarf's half-crushed buckler was restored to its original state as if time had been reversed. The buckler could not have come with that feature. Hikurad Murad launched emergency restoration. This was the ability of a monster called Living Armor. It was a useful ability that not only saved on equipment costs but also considerably increased the performance of equipment when the user was equipped with a magic item. The dwarf finished his repairs in an instant and shouted, I'll stand in front. Then you all support me from the sides. There were no objections. The only reason we managed to hold out until now was because of the dwarf. To be honest, I was the least useful person here. Even Aner had an essence now. I had nothing but the expensive mark of immortality. Well, I guess technically I could be a human shield. Kaya. At that moment, the vampire, who had been watching us from a distance, split his body into hundreds of crows. The flock of crows flapped their wings and flew toward us at high speed. Move as far away as you can. Then, the crows flying towards us dove headfirst into the ground and exploded. Bang, 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 bam, bang. There wasn't much explosive force behind each explosion. However, we also had to avoid blood splattering everywhere. Curse. It wasn't like the acidic blood of the corpse golem, of course. But, considering what followed, this was yet another headache. Bjorn. What the heck is that? A red tattoo etched itself onto our blood-soaked foreheads, and a bright light radiated from it. You have been chosen as a sacrifice. The physical attributes of Vampire Duke Cambormer temporarily increased according to the number of sacrifices within a radius of 100 meters. Ignoring the game log that flashed through my mind, I gritted my teeth. The vampire's form slowly regenerated from the pool of blood left on the ground by the exploding crows. Now that he had a buff, it would be even harder to deal with him. Has 3 minutes already passed? There was still a long way to go before our preparations could be finalized. Would we be able to survive until then? I shook my head. There was no point in asking whether it was possible or not. Bahella, we just have to hold on a little longer, with the grit of a barbarian. Open black lens bracket buff ability. Mark of the offering close black lens bracket. Eternal life. The user's ability to regenerate increases significantly in proportion to the energy lost. Open black lens bracket blood master. The ability to absorb part of the target's attributes by directly sucking their blood. Close black lens bracket. Each of these 3 active abilities that vampires possessed made them ridiculously powerful in hand-to-hand combat. The problem was that these weren't the only things this vampire had. Even ignoring those 3 abilities, that greedy son of a bitch was able to use various types of black magic. Bjorn. More crows. Transforming into exploding crows, turning into smoke to deflect a sword, using spilled blood to summon monsters, and more. This vampire bastard displayed a cunning characteristic of high-level monsters. That's why nobody who reaches the 6th floor simply gives up the game. Realizing once again how insane and difficult Dungeon and Stone was, I raised my shield. The shield was already torn by the vampire's claws and practically only crumpled metal remained, but better than nothing. Clang. I used the recoil from the blow to jump away and absorb as much of the impact as possible. Strength, speed, and skill, plus a bonus skill that I naturally acquired while fighting an enemy who surpassed me in every aspect. At that moment, Raven's voice echoed in my head. Please hold on for another 5 minutes. I wondered if that time would have been a little shorter if she had simply saved the mana she was using to send that message. But after hearing that hopeful news, I felt more energized. Hikurad has been hit. Of course, absolutely. After demonstrating the skills of a third-year adventurer, the dwarf who had been closely marking the vampire had fallen. Fortunately, Aner, who was nearby, approached and prevented the vampire from sucking his blood. Hikurad Murad's status has changed to incapable of combat. In an instant, the tide had turned. Aner and I were in tatters. It was nearly impossible for the 2 of us to stop him without the dwarf, who was bearing more than 50% of the brunt of the fight. Then, I made a quick decision. Aner, take Murad and retreat. But, I'll hold him. Oh okay. The moment Aner placed Murad on his shoulders, I stepped forward and swung my mace. Smack. That was my first real beat in a while. As the attack landed successfully, a sharp pain shot through my head from the recoil. It was all because this madman was a high-level mutant. The vampire Duke Cambormer has launched pain sharing. He was still able to fully recover from his injuries simply by taking a step back to catch his breath. Damn, meanwhile, I was still in pain. What kind of idiot is this guy? Kaya. Still, the aggro was focused on me, just as I wanted. Out of habit, I checked to see if the item hidden in my boots was still there. The item's name was Tears of a Goddess. Simply put, it was a sacred object. Although it was a single-use item, it could be used for healing purposes and also to attack evil monsters. Should I use this now? It wouldn't be a waste to use it. No matter how unique the item's effects were, it was a special item that could only be used in the Bloody Citadel anyway. If I used it on the dwarf, his strength would be restored immediately, and if used on the vampire, it would inflict considerable damage. But, no, I stopped worrying about nothing. What was the reason I had been diligently waiting until now? Because one blow was more than enough. Anything more than that would be bad for us. We would only have one opportunity. And when the time came, we would have to give it our all. There was only one way for the 5 of us to take down a level 5 monster. Click. I grabbed a potion bottle from my waist and opened the cap. I poured the potion into my mouth, my eyes still fixed on the vampire running towards me, and shish. The countless wounds I had accumulated during the battle began to heal, and the pain surged like a gigantic wave. I felt the strength leaving my hands, and all I wanted was to collapse to the ground. After all, it was almost impossible to drink a potion and continue fighting, but it doesn't matter. I wasn't trying to fight. Tear it up. Then, the vampire's claws were embedded in my abdomen. The metal armor on my chest was rendered useless as its claws dug deep into my flesh. My nerves were going crazy, sending danger signals to my brain. My mind went blank, my senses completely overwhelmed. Damn, if I'd known this was going to happen, I would have taken the essence of the corpse golem for myself. Leaving behind my belated regrets, I poured another potion into my mouth. Shish. The wound healed rapidly from the layered healing effects of both the open black lens bracket mark of immortality close black lens bracket and the potions. Kyok. I stared directly at the surprised bastard vampire who seemed not to understand what was happening. To be honest, I felt like I was going to faint from the pain. Bahela, you son of a bitch. Pain can't kill me. The fact that I'm still alive is proof of that. What the hell is he doing? Raven, watching the battle from behind some rubble in the distance, couldn't hide her shock. She had read about the extraordinary strategies and hunting methods of many adventurers in her books, but this was unlike anything she had ever seen. He's planning to stop the vampire with just potions. There's no way he can succeed. He's going to die. This simply didn't make logical sense. She knew because she had consumed potions several times before. The pain was unimaginable, and the severity of the pain increased depending on the severity of the injury. But that barbarian, shish, it wasn't just bubbles boiling and vaporizing on his body, smoke completely enveloped him. Not even she had ever seen anything like it before. Suffering an injury wasn't the main problem now, it was that dying of shock in situations like this was not uncommon at all. In fact, cases of people dying from consuming the potion were quite common. Raven stopped hopping restlessly from one foot to the other, her eyes widening. The pain that Barbarian must be feeling now was beyond her imagination, and one thing was certain, in his current state, he shouldn't even be able to move. But what was that? Clang! Even as he collapsed to the ground with his shield, which was now little more than a mangled pile of metal, the barbarian blocked the vampire's claws as they surged toward him. And, as if to prove it wasn't a coincidence, clang! He did this several times, repeatedly. Of course, he wasn't able to successfully block all the attacks. As she watched, her entire body was being pierced by those merciless claws. But, clang! Attacks targeting the most vulnerable parts of his body, such as the head or heart, were blocked by well-timed pushes from his shield. Is that logically possible? She couldn't tell if he was purposefully overcoming the pain to avoid the attacks using superhuman willpower, or if it was simply the last of his fighting instincts that made it possible. However, a document she had read long ago suddenly came to mind. In it, the writer had said that the true value of barbarians lay in their psychological strength, not in their physical superiority. Somehow, I think I understand now. At that moment, Tarzine, who had been watching the battle with her, suddenly spoke. Lady Raven, it would be best to retreat while we still can, he said firmly. He spoke of retreating, but in reality, he intended to abandon these people and flee. I'm not sure I can protect you this way. It's too dangerous here. She was too speechless to speak. Do you think I don't know that? If she could, she would have left already. Although she was often told she was a soft-hearted mage, Raven wasn't naive enough to risk her life for the sake of the adventurers she had just met. But, are you crazy? Retreat? To where? There was nowhere to run. There was only one way out of the rift, and that was to defeat the Guardian and exit through the portal. This man must be fighting so desperately because he knows this too. It was as if a spark had shot through his brain. Even a barbarian who had just gone through his coming-of-age ceremony was keeping a cool head, making smart decisions, and doing the best he could under the current circumstances. Meanwhile, what was she, a mage, doing now? If Bjorn dies, all is lost. We have to keep him alive somehow. A mage wasn't someone who simply cast powerful spells from the depths of the battlefield. It was also a mage's duty to coldly analyze the situation using their knowledge in various areas and suggest the most efficient course of action for the group. Raven reassessed the current situation. The third-year dwarf warrior was unable to fight. The barbarian was feeding him potions and helping him recover. No problems so far, but the mage was hidden deep inside, waiting for her mana to be restored with a human swordsman guarding her. Now that she thought about it, that was a waste of resources. Tarzine, go to Mr. Murad. Forgiveness. I'm fine. At least go over there so that the barbarian can join the battle. Understood. Leave your backpack here. Tarzine nervously followed his commands without uttering a complaint. Without even seeing him leave, Raven reached into his subspace backpack. The essence of the corpse golem. As soon as she pictured it in her head, the test tube appeared in her hand. I really don't. No, I really don't want to have to use this, but this is nothing compared to a person's life. Raven slowly gathered her mana and began to draw a magic circle. Womb. Precision support. Range support. Automatic target locking. If she added a few more things to the formula, she wouldn't even need to move her arms. But I have to save at least some of my magic. After completing the circle, she threw the test tube in her hand as hard as she could. And, crack, the test tube, which flew in a smooth arc, hit its target and broke apart, emitting a light. The essence of the corpse golem is being absorbed into your soul. Pain resistance increased by +70. Strength increased by +15. Strength of bones. Opening square bracket ellipsis closing square bracket. Opening square bracket ellipsis closing square bracket. Bjorn Yandel. Level 2. Physical. 80 new +34. Spirit. 46 new +10. Special ability. 30 new +26. Equipment level. 202. Overall combat power. 203.5 new +70. Essence acquired. Corpse Golem. Level 7 new. Chapter 35. Warrior 3/3. Open hollow corner bracket translator. Mr. Rhodey close hollow corner bracket. My mind was blank and my vision was blurry. Did I feel pain? Obviously. It was as if my entire body had been stabbed and was now being submerged in saltwater. All I wanted to do at that moment was give up, but... Shut up. I forced myself to push away those weak thoughts. When you're at a crossroads, you have to choose. What are you willing to sacrifice, and what will you protect in return? Tear it up. Something sharp pierced my thigh. That's all right, though. It wasn't an area that posed an immediate threat to my life. However, the vampire was growing enraged by the fact that its prey refused to die, no matter how many times it tore it apart. Kaya, the damned vampire's movements grew more ferocious. But what I needed to do was clear. Lifting the shield that had been cut, torn in half, and reduced in size, I managed at least to protect my most vulnerable parts. Crack. The face of the shield, which couldn't withstand the attack of a 5th-level monster, was finally torn off, leaving only the handle. Without even thinking, I raised my arms to protect my head. At that moment, clang, something other than a claw collided with my head and shattered, sharp splinters falling down my back. The essence of the corpse golem is penetrating your soul. The pain quickly subsided. Pain resistance increased by +70. A newfound vigor filled a body that had previously reached its limit. Strength increased by +15. My eyes, which had only been blurry, began to clear. The first thing I saw was the vampire's sharp claws approaching the arms I had wrapped around my head. As soon as I saw that, my subconscious conjured up an image of my arms being cut off. But what actually happened was completely different. Fium. The claws easily pierced the soft flesh. However, that was all they managed to do. Cock. The claws were stopped by the bones and wouldn't advance any further. It was at that point that I realized what this mysterious new power of mine was. Bone strength increased by +55. Poison resistance increased by +12. Perception decreased by -5. Appetite increased by +9. Weight increased by +21. Your blood is now acidic due to the passive ability acidic fluids. A feeling of relief and disappointment washed over me at the same time. Did she feed me the essence of the corpse golem? Because of this, my strategy for leveling up will have to be drastically revised. However, looking at the present from a myopic perspective for the first time, things were improving. Now, I had an increased chance of surviving. I rolled backward and jumped off the ground. Was it a side effect of pain tolerance? Now that the pain problem had been resolved to some extent, nothing prevented me from moving. But what about the Guardian's essence? Since I absorbed the essence of the corpse golem, is that also available? The thoughts that had suddenly appeared in my mind were dismissed. That was something I could worry about later. Kaya. Perhaps the sudden liveliness of his prey intrigued him, because the vampire lunged at me with enthusiasm. I moved to avoid it, but what followed wasn't much different from what had been happening before. It was clear that it was impossible to subdue a 5th-level monster with only a 7th-level essence. The only difference was that the flesh shield that had initially been battered on the ground was now able to stand up and move. That's probably all that has changed. But despite the self-deprecating self-assessment, I smiled. Rasp, flish, cock, fingernails cutting through flesh, tearing at my intestines. The potion I had consumed earlier had already been digested, so my healing speed was impaired. But it didn't matter. The mage, who had been passively watching the fight the whole time, must have realized that her life was also in danger, because she started gambling all her fortune on me. Clang. A glass bottle was thrown and shattered, spilling its contents all over my body. Your body is regenerating rapidly due to the effects of recovery greater. Could this perhaps be a high-class potion? It was obvious that this one was of superior quality to the potion I received from the blonde. SHHHZZ. My wounds began to heal faster than before. In response, I decided to throw myself at the vampire with more enthusiasm. So what if my flesh is cut and my muscles are torn? Everything will heal in a few seconds anyway. Kaya. I screamed as I was pushed back by the vampire and continued to engage in hand-to-hand combat. I had no other choice. My mace was far away, and my shield had been reduced to a pile of crumpled metal. Kya kayak. Perhaps he hadn't yet encountered an adventurer who used fundamental skills, because he was extremely frightened when I jumped on his back like a cicada and strangled his neck. Or perhaps he was just in pain. Kaya. Smoke began to rise where our flesh came into contact with it. Shish. It was impossible to say for sure whether the smoke was from my acidic blood coming into contact with his skin or if it was the usual smoke that came from healing myself with a potion. But it didn't matter. It was probably both. Even in a tense combat situation like this, another potion flew out and shattered with a loud bang. Your body is regenerating rapidly due to the effects of recovery greater. There was no doubt that potions and acids were two different things. The moment the potion broke, the choking vampire screamed louder and easily threw me away from him. I could clearly feel the overwhelming difference in our strength. But, damn, that idiot isn't all that great. I was starting to see a way out. In my current state, in a barbarian's immortality mode, I could survive a few minutes against this idiot. I was sure of it. Bjorn, I'll help you. Einar even returned to the battle. And Murad, the bearer is taking care of him. The addition of Einar worked very much in my favor. I could take on the role of main tank by consuming potions, and whenever things got a little too dangerous, Einar could brandish his sword to give me time to catch my breath. This battle had become a little easier. Kaya, oh dear, watch out, the crows will fly away soon. The moment Einar took a large step back at my shout, the vampire's body transformed into hundreds of crows that flew towards us. However, the flock didn't reach us, as we were one step ahead. Bjorn, you're amazing. How did you know this was going to happen? Because that guy always half closes one eye before using that ability. More than a characteristic of all vampires, it seemed more like a habit that applied only to this guy. I could actually see an end to this fight now. How embarrassing for me, everyone else did so well. Ha ha ha. So the dwarf, who had healed his wounds with a potion, returned to the fight. He even brought the bearer with him. From now on, I'll help too. We'll help you from the sides. Naturally, I continued playing my role as the main tank. Not that the others were being cowardly. They seemed to genuinely believe that this was the best strategy. The dwarf warrior with 3 years of experience approached the barbarian with 2 months of experience. Bjorn, the great warrior and son of Yandel, you are more than capable. Ha ha ha. He seemed to think it was a compliment, but this just means I'm going to have to work like a dog until this is over. I had never gotten anything for free in my life. This was nothing new at this point. Bahella. While the 4 of us were dealing with the vampire in a formation with me in the center, the moment I had been desperately waiting for finally arrived. A strange thought entered my mind. It's ready. If this meant she had recovered enough mana to cast open black lens bracket sunspot sphere close black lens bracket and even open black lens bracket attribute enhancement close black lens bracket, that meant everything was finally ready. In other words, it was time to end this incredibly long fight and get out of here. I can use magic at any time. The moment I heard his confirmation, I shouted loudly, Murad. Now, use lightning release. The order was given without any prior discussion, let alone strategy. However, the dwarf immediately carried out my instructions without saying a word. Z's, Z's. A yellow light shone on the dwarf's hammer, and sparks began to fly. Hikurad Murad launched lightning. This was the ability of a rank 7 monster, Ilatrek. It allowed a strong current to flow through part of its body. The dwarf readied his hammer, holding it low as if preparing for an upward strike. Everyone, you better stay behind a bit. Ha ha ha. After giving a brief warning, the dwarf swung his hammer through the air with all his might. Far from the target, you say. Small details like that didn't matter. Hikurad Murad released. Release was one of the rare transformation abilities in Dungeon and Stone. It allowed the user to release energy acquired through other abilities outside of their body. Whoom. A ball of lightning shot out of the hammer like a cannonball and it exploded, literally. Bang, bang, bang. Compared to the sound it made, the force of the explosion was weak. No craters were created in the ground, no vampire limbs were ripped off, nothing like that. However, Vampire Duke Cambormer fell unconscious. The key component of this combination wasn't its power to begin with. In an instant, the dwarf had stunned the rank 5 monster and turned to give a signal. In a very analog way. Raven. Fortunately, the signal was understood correctly, and a powerful light immediately focused on a rooftop 200 meters away. I quickly pulled out the item I had hidden in my boots. It was a small jewel the size of a fingernail, open black lens bracket tears of a goddess close black lens bracket. Despite all the crises we faced, I waited and waited to wear it at this very moment. Huff, huff, with the item in hand, I ran. And after shoving it into the vampire's mouth, smack, I hit him with an uppercut as hard as I could to finish it off. Crunch, there was a sound of something breaking, and in a short time, a brilliant white purity burst forth from his mouth. The tears of a goddess have been destroyed. Grace descended upon the ruins. All of Vampire Duke Cambormer's resistances were temporarily suppressed by grace, and he suffers a critical blow. Blood gushed from the vampire's lips like a fountain. He seemed fine on the outside, but inside he was in ruins. It was shocking. So, one item wasn't enough, huh? Due to the severe impact, Vampire Duke Cambormer is paralyzed. No longer unconscious, the vampire's fingers began to twitch. Not yet, I can't wait any longer. The moment that thought came to mind, I started turning my head. Arua Raven cast the rank 6 attack spell Sunspot Sphere. A dazzling, shimmering sphere flew through the darkness and passed right by my nose. Regret came a moment later. Boom. Damn, I should have turned away sooner. You were caught in the explosion of the Sunspot Sphere and fell unconscious. Vampire Duke Cambormer launched pain sharing. Hikurad Murad fell unconscious. Aner Fenelon fell unconscious. Beep. A ringing sound echoed in my ears, not unlike the sound a TV makes after the national anthem. And through the buzzing, I could hear a conversation. A conversation not unlike a comedy sketch on TV. How can a butcher sell cooked meat? No, that's raw meat. How can cooked meat be raw meat? But, still listening to their conversation, I opened my eyes. Is he alive? A dark sky appeared. I could smell cooked meat through my nose. Was the smell coming from my body? Kurg. When I opened my mouth, there was a scratching sound coming from my parched throat. My ears seemed fine too. I decided to focus on the positive things as much as possible. Quirk. Ah, Sunspot Sphere. An attack spell with solar properties combined with fire and holy attributes. It was weaker than its counterpart, open black lens bracket fireball close black lens bracket. That was lucky for me. If it hadn't been for a weaker spell, I might really have met my end. But why is it so quiet? Caught in the explosion of the open black lens bracket Sunspot Sphere close black lens bracket, I temporarily passed out. This was clear, but I didn't have enough information to understand my current situation. Why haven't I been healed yet, and why can't I hear anything around me? I gripped the ground with my blood-stained hands, which were covered in my wounds, and stood up. Then, I forced my eyes to focus and looked ahead. The first thing I saw was the damn vampire. Curse. Why was he still alive? Of course, he was also in terrible condition. Both his arms were torn off, and bones were visible through his damaged upper chest. He didn't even seem to be conscious. But, the Vampire Duke Cambormer's regeneration ability has been significantly increased by the Eternal Life effect. Even at this moment, his wounds were healing. Considering that his healing factor was proportional to the amount of HP he lost, it wouldn't take long for his chest to heal and his severed arms to grow back. Damn it. Hell, I looked around and saw several unconscious bodies. The dwarf, Aner, the damned bearer. I had a feeling that the sorceress, whom I had seen on the roof in the distance earlier, was in a similar state. I was confused. What kind of crazy situation was this? Why did everyone faint after finally cornering the bastard? What the hell happened while I was gone? It didn't seem like it had been that long after all. All sorts of questions filled my mind, but I decided to push them all aside and instead took a step forward with my foot still. Thump, thump. I still couldn't accept the current situation. But one thing was very clear. I needed to decide what to do now. Thump, thump, thump. Vampire Duke Cambormer. I needed to get rid of him before he regained consciousness. There were no other options. No matter how rich a sorceress was, the number of potions she possessed wasn't infinite. In fact, it wouldn't be possible to use the same strategy of sustaining my body with potions anymore. Thump, thump. So I staggered forward, a pain that managed to penetrate even my open black lens bracket pain resistance close black lens bracket ability. Ignoring it, I stretched my flesh-smelling legs out in front of me. Thump. Pain was a sign of life. At least, that's what I thought. It wasn't like there hadn't been a moment when I thought the exact opposite, but for now, it was. So I kept walking. As I got closer, I realized that even the damned vampire smelled of grilled meat. I relaxed my knees and fell right on top of him. You damned bastard. The scar on his chest, which was deep enough to show the bones, had already closed a little as I walked over it. I couldn't help but curse him. Smack. So I punched him in the chest. A vampire's weakness was its heart. Even if its brain were destroyed, these damned creatures could be revived as long as their hearts remained intact. Ah, so that's why the idiot's arms were ripped off. He blocked the Sunspot Sphere with his arms. I could picture the events in my mind, but as usual, I let the thought fade away. Smack. And I banged my fists again. I missed my braces more than ever. But hey, when you don't have teeth, you have to chew with your gums. Smack. I didn't even know where my mace was, and my shield had long since been discarded and thrown somewhere. Of course, Aner's greatsword and the dwarf's battlehammer were on the ground. The idea of catching them never even crossed my mind, but I wouldn't even have the strength to grab any of them anyway. As I pounded my fists, the seams of my half-crushed and perforated armor ripped open and fell to the ground. My 360,000 stones. I glanced at the half-armor, which had been corroded by my newly produced acidic blood, and realized that repairing it would be difficult. Although what truly troubled me was something entirely different. Curse. It was like pouring water through a strainer. No matter how many times I punched the vampire, nothing changed. Why on earth were his ribs so durable? I had assumed that if I kept hitting him, his ribs would break and eventually pierce his heart. Okay, change of plans. I've always liked having a plan B because my plan A versions rarely succeeded. Thanks to my terrible luck, things always ended up going wrong in the end. But we've never done this before, is this how it works? Irwin said it was important to visualize clearly. Meat explosion. Boom. The hand I placed on the man's chest exploded. Well, this works. Although the explosion itself wasn't very powerful, the acid mixed with the flesh and blood had caused minor damage to the vampire's chest. Even so, he healed quickly. Well, I wasn't expecting it to be such a fatal blow all at once anyway. I launched the meat explosion consecutively. Boom, boom, boom. By the 10th explosion, my left hand was completely in tatters. But due to my increased bone strength, my bones remained intact even as my skin dissolved, making me look like some kind of skeleton. In any case, I could no longer use my left hand. Now it was the right hand's turn. Even knowing it was insane, I placed my right hand on the vampire's chest, continued reciting the spell in my head, and kept blasting him. Meat explosion, meat explosion, meat explosion. Meanwhile, I ignored the pain rushing toward me, pushing and exceeding my limits as much as I could. I felt like I was going to die, but I wasn't doing all this just to collapse afterward. I was going to survive. At any cost. Boom. And after 8 more uses of the spell, I staggered. I just need a few more. Warning. Your health has dropped below 1%. If you do not receive treatment soon, you will die. I felt it instinctively. I had reached a point where I could no longer overcome this pain with willpower alone. I had to stop now. Otherwise, although I might be able to kill the vampire in the process, I would also die. Even while I had that moment of clarity, my logical side reasoned, well, if I'm going to die anyway, I couldn't stop, but it definitely wasn't for the sake of my teammates. Boom. I might have seemed like a lunatic to anyone watching, but at that moment, I was certain. If I had even the slightest chance of survival, this was it. Boom. The moment I exploded my flesh again. Warning. Your health has reached 0%. I felt something change. It felt like something was escaping from my body, but it also felt strangely light. Soon enough, I realized what was happening. The countdown has begun. Ah, that's it. The thing I used to call the blinking light at the end of the tunnel. Consuming 3 spirit points per second, 43/46. Consuming 3 spirit points per second, 40/46. Consuming 3 spirit points per second, 37/46. Even though it felt like the Reaper was hovering over my shoulder, I exploded my flesh again. Boom. The depression in the vampire's chest grew. But were my barbaric battle instincts kicking in? It seemed the path ahead was clearer than ever. Just one more time. Then, meat explosion. Instead of my right arm, which was now almost devoid of flesh, I let my chest fall on top of the vampire and unleashed another explosion. And at that moment, the vampire Duke Cambormer has been killed. Express +5. The damned vampire's body transformed into particles of light. Then you can die. High-class mutant bonus. Express +1. Guardian death bonus. Express +3. My heart swelled. Not emotionally, but literally. Having experienced this sensation before, I immediately realized what was happening. You leveled up. Soul power increased by +10. The maximum number of essences you can absorb has increased by +1. I had leveled up, but I couldn't be particularly happy about it. That's because the moment had arrived. Dungeon and Stone wasn't a game that replenished your health when you leveled up. Consuming 3 spirit points per second, 16/46. How many seconds did I have until I died? I couldn't be sure, but I'd say I had at most about 5 seconds. Did I leave this for too late? No matter how I looked at it, I couldn't help but hate the situation I was in. However, I chose not to have regrets. In the game, there is approximately a 33% chance of a Rift Guardian spitting out an essence. 33%. The odds were very low to bet your life on it. However, it was undoubtedly a non-zero chance. I have no reason not to try. I smiled, shaking off all my regrets. I had resisted to the very end. Now, all that remained was to wait for the result. Consuming 3 spirit points per second, 13/46. Consuming 3 spirit points per second, 10/46. Consuming 3 spirit points per 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. As time passed, my eyes slowly closed. Did I fail? I hadn't failed because of any mistake I made. I was simply unlucky. Maybe this is the kind of ending I was always meant to have. I closed my eyes, leaving things to fate, hoping that when I woke up again, I would once more be Lee Hansu, the 29-year-old office worker. I knew for sure that wasn't going to happen. Open black lens bracket vampire essence. Guardian was absorbed into his soul close black lens bracket. Natural regeneration increased by plus 45. Strength increased by plus 15. Agility increased by plus 15. Magic resistance increased by plus 30. Thanks to the passive ability Source of Darkness, you will not die unless your heart is destroyed. Your healing factor has increased significantly thanks to the Eternal Life skill. Your HP is now above 1%. The countdown has ended. Achievement unlocked. Condition: survive after a countdown. Reward: your spirit attribute has been permanently increased by plus 1. Bjorn Yandel, level 3 new plus 1. Physical 155. New plus 75. Spirit 90 new plus 44. Special ability 115 new plus 85. Equipment level 98 new minus 104. Overall combat power 381.5 new plus 204. Essences acquired: Corpse Golem, rank 7, Vampire Guardian, rank 5 new. An abnormal amount of progress has been made. The administrator will be monitoring your character now. Chapter 36. Guild 1/5. Open hollow corner bracket translator. Mr. Rhodey close hollow corner bracket. Hey, Mr. Yandel, wake up. As Raven shook Bjorn's shoulder, the other members of her group began to wake up one by one. Miss Raven, what happened? Bjorn is dead. Mrs. Raven, I'm so glad you're well. Questions flew in her direction, and Raven was the only one who could answer them, because she hadn't fainted. The vampire is dead. Mr. Yandel is alive. Tarzine, I'm fine, so can you stop yelling in my ear? Incredible, his magic killed a vampire with a single blow. Murad's exclamation made her purse her lips. She felt furious for some reason. It hadn't been open black lens bracket sunspot sphere close black lens bracket that had killed the vampire. In terms of contribution, victory wouldn't have been possible without her efforts, but it wasn't me, it was Mr. Yandel. What do you mean? It was Mr. Yandel who killed the vampire. Murad's eyebrows furrowed. This guy here, although he had praised him as special and a great warrior before, he couldn't believe that Bjorn had killed a level 5 monster. And Raven understood how he felt. If I were hearing this from someone else, I would think the same thing. Perhaps it was because of how far removed from the battle she had been, but she hadn't been affected by the open black lens bracket sharing of pain close black lens bracket and had served as the sole witness, observing these incredible events unfold. Yes, literally, just observing. What else could a mage without mana have done? Everyone, thank Mr. Yandel. Without him, none of you would be able to open your eyes again. Well, yes, but could you tell us a little more about what happened? She was thinking about how to explain when Einar interrupted. So what happened to Bjorn? Shouldn't we give him a potion? In other words, if you have a potion, pull it. Raven shook her head. A potion would be useless, she replied. It seems his body has largely healed already. If she were to venture a guess, this man wouldn't need potions much from now on. Most of his wounds would heal relatively quickly. Then why hasn't he woken up yet? I'm not sure either. However, what do you know? What is it? Magician, speak. Raven took a deep breath before answering. It's probably exhaustion. Exhaustion. Didn't you say his body is healed? Einar placed a hand, dirty with earth and dried blood, on Raven's shoulder. She looked as if the world itself was ending. What, you two are a real couple? Raven asked. Oh, no, why did you jump to that conclusion so suddenly? Einar replied irritably. Anyway, I'm not sure either. I'm not a priestess. I only know of a few similar cases. Cases, Miss Raven, is that common? It's not common, but it happens occasionally. The body healed, but the mind didn't recover enough to wake up. Warriors who had experienced extreme trauma or who had truly dedicated themselves to battle sometimes fell into this state. After hearing this explanation, Einar raised his voice. I've never heard anything like it. Besides, it doesn't even make sense. Too mentally exhausted to wake up. Bjorn isn't that weak. Not so weak, huh? At this point, Raven completely agreed. A few hours ago, she would have internally snorted at that comment, but now she couldn't. She alone had witnessed him fight that vampire to the bitter end. But that's why she was sure her theory was correct. To be honest, I'm almost certain. The reason Mr. Yandel isn't waking up is because he's mentally exhausted. Too exhausted to wake up. That had nothing to do with being weak or strong. It was simply the logical consequence of what he had endured. That woman wouldn't have said what she said if she had seen the fight for herself. She may have witnessed something incredibly rare today. Maga. So, when is Bjorn going to wake up? I'm not sure. It could take at least a day or two at most. Then he'll wake up in a few hours. Because Bjorn is a great warrior. Then why did you ask me? Raven was getting annoyed again, but for some reason, she didn't feel compelled to argue with her. More precisely, she didn't have the energy for it. In fact, the barbarian's words didn't sound as arrogant as they usually did. A great warrior. Since ancient times, fewer than 10 barbarians had officially received this title from the king. Well, it seems that today's barbarians use it more as a common compliment. She gathered her thoughts again before continuing. The open black lens bracket essence of a corpse golem close black lens bracket and the open black lens bracket essence of a vampire close black lens bracket and the open black lens bracket essence of a guardian close black lens bracket on top of that. The barbarian had absorbed both. He had completed his coming-of-age ceremony last month, and hadn't he said this was his second time entering the labyrinth? As she stared at the unconscious barbarian, she opened her mouth. Indeed, that could be the case someday. Of course, for that to happen, he would have to survive dozens of other challenges like this one. Did I survive? When I woke up, it was late at night. For some reason, I was lying in Einar's lap, and as soon as our eyes met, she screamed, waking me completely. Bjorn, where are the others? Everyone's gone. Bjorn, are you all right? I was worried. You were unconscious for 3 whole days. 3 days have passed, so, does that make today the 7th day? This woke me up, and I sat up immediately. Then I assessed my current state. No visible external injuries. As for my health, apart from being hungry, I was generally fine. By the way, Einar, what kind of pants am I wearing? Pants was a generous description. A piece of fabric that could have been used as a scarf was wrapped around my lower body, covering only the important parts. To be more precise, it was more like a skirt than pants, and a very small skirt at that. Oh, the sorceress gave me an extra piece of fabric. And you dressed me in it. Sure. A slight sense of embarrassment arose, but it was somewhat lessened because Einar didn't seem to mind in the slightest. In fact, it would be strange for a warrior to feel embarrassed about such things. There's no reason to be ashamed. Bjorn, you truly are a great warrior. Well, that doesn't mean you can sexually harass me. So, what happened after that? I changed the subject to push the humiliation out of my mind. I was wondering what had happened after I passed out, especially with the loot. The numbered item, Murad took it, and the rift stones were carried away by the mage. What? It was one shock after another. The fact that I was alive now meant that I had absorbed the vampire's essence. Did that mean the vampire had dropped all 3 items? What kind of special event was that? Ah, yes, we didn't roll any dice when distributing the abyss stones. The mage argued that she had to take everything to compensate for her losses, so, Einar continued, trying to justify what had happened to me. Murad said he didn't care, but I said no. But then the mage said something strange. Strange. She said you got the biggest reward of all, so you can't complain about her getting the rift stones. It seems the sorceress was the only one who realized I had absorbed the vampire's essence. I nodded silently. I had no complaints about this distribution of loot. Whatever the reason, the mage fed me the essence of the corpse golem. Besides, considering the cost of the potion she poured on me, she basically only incurred losses while in the rift. Being greedy with the rift stones at this point would only make me an idiot. Einar seemed to think a little differently, though. Well, I told her to wait until you woke up and then we could decide, but I couldn't stop her. They waited for more than half a day, but you still hadn't woken up, so they all went through the portal and left. You don't need to blame yourself. You couldn't have done anything wrong. I could only imagine the expressions on the faces of the people who had been held captive for half a day by Einar's persuasive power. The best thing to do here was simply to thank her. Thank you. I'm glad you were there for me. I only did what made sense. We're comrades. I checked my belongings, which Einar seemed to have gathered. A backpack, a mace, some pieces of metal that might have previously been my shield. Even so, if I sell them, the price of iron could accumulate. After putting everything I could see into my backpack, I grabbed some food and a water bottle and filled my hungry stomach. Then, I checked the time. 23:20, less than an hour before the portal closes. Bjorn, when you're finished eating, how about we leave? We don't have much time now. I firmly refused. We can't. Actually, I desperately wanted to get out of this nauseating place right now, but, after everything I'd been through, I should at least take everything I could with me. I also wanted to check out the boss's office. The sorceress got the Necronomicon, so there's only one thing left. It seemed like I would have to move quickly. You entered the crystal cave on the 1st floor. The maze is now closed. You are being transported to Raftania. Feeling the sunlight on my skin for the first time in a while, I exhaled. I did it. It was a close call. Time had been tighter than I expected. It took me less than 10 minutes to find the item hidden in the ceiling of the outer wall's watchtower after climbing the ladder, but getting to the boss's room had been a race against time. And it was all in vain. Einar said that the others had waited for me for half a day, but perhaps the sorceress actually just wanted to use that time to conduct her research. Well, it would be strange for someone with your personality to just sit around doing nothing. The boss's office had walls that were crumbling here and there. A picture frame was torn. There was even a box in a shape I'd never seen before, left open and abandoned. I'm sure there was some extra loot there, but she must have taken it for herself. We rushed in at full speed, and the room already showed signs of a thorough investigation. However, instead of being angry at having been tricked, I was more curious about what the item had been. And rightly so, because this was an unusual rift that had never been cleared before. An element that even I, someone who had been playing this game for 9 years, didn't know about. My curiosity as a player was piqued. It's not like she would have let me keep him if I'd asked. I'll have to ask about it next time I see her. Anyway, I searched everywhere to see if there was anything the mage had missed, and soon time was running out. In fact, the portal closed as soon as we left the rift, so we had to cut right past it. We almost got stuck in the boss room without a boss monster, forever. Serum, Kennick's fourth son. You have more scars. I envy you. That's nothing. Carrick, third son of Fanon. As I gathered my thoughts, I heard the scattered voices of the barbarians in the crowd. Luckily, they hadn't noticed me yet. I lowered my head to stay out of sight and headed for the currency exchange for 9th level adventurers. Fortunately, I arrived early, so the line wasn't long. There weren't any barbarians to bother me either. When I handed over my mana stones, the worker exchanged them for money, just like last time. There are 231,520 stones. 230,000 stones. It was an amount that seemed infinitely small compared to the difficulties I went through. However, that's not all. I absorbed 2 essences during this adventure. Furthermore, the profits I would receive from selling the items in my possession would be several times greater than the profits from the mana stones. For some reason, mana stones always become a supplementary, not primary, source of income for adventurers. I didn't know whether I should be happy or sad about it. With a bitter smile, I was about to grab my bag when that amount is far too high for a 9th level adventurer. The officer retrieved the bag they had placed there and looked at me strangely. What's in the backpack on your back? What do I have in my backpack? It wasn't like I couldn't answer the question, but why are you asking? I felt a shiver run down my spine. I looked around and saw guards rapidly approaching me in the distance. It looked like the worker had pressed some kind of emergency call button that was hidden under the table. Is this the man? Yes. I raised my hands to express my intention to cooperate with the authorities, but the guards exchanged a few words with the officials and then forcibly grabbed my arms. Damn it, I came back from the dead just for this to happen. Barbarian, let's talk somewhere private. Instinctively, I knew I was screwed. Chapter 37. Guild 2/5. Open hollow corner bracket translator. Mr. Rhodey close hollow corner bracket. I was sitting in a chair. Strangely, the iron shackles on my arms and legs seemed like an additional feature, and they were fastened to the floor with nails. Can't I have a moment of peace? To summarize the situation, I was currently in an interrogation room located in the basement of the Adventurers Guild. On the other side of me was my interrogator. He must have been in his early 30s, and his defining characteristic was that he was an extremely obese man who spoke in a pompous manner. I am Koldo Bierman and I am in charge of the investigation of this case. I'm going to ask you some questions now, so I hope you will cooperate with my investigation. Investigation? Shouldn't you tell me why I was arrested in the first place? I asked, without backing down. I didn't even mind waiting for a not guilty until proven guilty approach, but this was a reasonable right for a defendant to have even in this era. Paft. The wretched investigator kicked me in the ankle. When I looked at him, he smiled as if asking what was wrong. Rule number 1, you only speak when you're answering my questions. Got it. All good. Follow the rules and you won't get hurt. You can be sure of that. My butt is hurt. After what I went through in the maze, getting kicked in the ankle didn't even tickle. That idiot must have some disillusionment about his job. Anyway, to answer your question, Bjorn Yandel, you were arrested on charges of looting inside the labyrinth. Accusations of looting. What kind of nonsense is this? The investigator grabbed my backpack upside down and spilled the contents on the floor. He whistled sarcastically. That's a lot. Adventure supplies, such as torches in a sleeping bag, and one of the special items I obtained in the Bloody Citadel could be seen in the pile. While sorting through the food and other miscellaneous items, the investigator took out the equipment and placed it on the table. It was mostly stuff from the group of 4 who betrayed us in the land of the dead. If you didn't loot anyone, where did all this come from? A barbarian wouldn't use a bow. This belonged to a group that tried to kill me first. And your evidence? Evidence. I didn't have anything of the sort, but I had no reason to be intimidated by it. So you have some proof that what I'm saying isn't true? I retorted. Well, I'll have to investigate that further. Are you going to arrest and investigate someone because of this? That was the part one really didn't understand. This was different from the Adventurers Guild's usual procedure. There was an unwritten rule in the city not to question adventurers without evidence, no matter what they brought out of the labyrinth. For this reason, the guild never took the initiative to search for looters until reports or testimonies reached them. However, the guild's internal rules changed a few days ago. Well, that left me speechless. I was reminded once again that this wasn't just a game, but a world where many people lived. Official guidelines instructed us to first apply the rules to 9th level explorers to deter acts of looting. In short, it meant that the small fry would be the lab rats. No matter where you went, being the lowest rung on the ladder meant you were going to suffer. I could roughly imagine how they chose who to target with these investigations as well. Either someone who had collected a lot of mana stones or someone with equipment that looked like it belonged to someone else in their backpack. Something like that. So, I already had 2 strikes against me. Well, then, tell me, where did you get that from? Anyway, his initial attitude must have been just to discourage me, because after that, the idiot conducted a normal investigation. So, I explained what happened during my time in the maze in the most cooperative way possible. Leaving out the psychopathic bitch, of course. To tell him about it, I would also have to talk about the oath, and a barbarian who broke an oath would seem strange. It would be far more dangerous to be accused of being an evil spirit than to be accused of murder. Especially since I wouldn't have a chance to explain myself. Furthermore, reporting that woman could put me in danger of being murdered in the middle of the night. So, I only briefly reported encountering a group of 4 looters, being subdued, and miraculously killing them. However, the damned investigator was indifferent to everything. What, you survived a stab wound to the neck? You tell lies that not even a child would believe. I only speak the truth. So where's the scar on your neck? If your words are true, it should have left a mark, right? Unconsciously, I touched my neck. It was smooth, flawless. And there was a clear reason for that. Upon consuming the vampire's essence, my healing power increased so much that even the scar on my neck had healed. Why are things getting so complicated? Reluctantly, I also explained about the rift. The only problem was that the idiot investigator wouldn't listen to a word I said. Ha ha ha, a rift, a vampire. There's no logic in your barbaric words. I swear that everything I say is true. Perhaps he hardened his stance against me even further because a warrior's oath, which usually always worked in my favor, proved useless this time. What honor is there in being a plunderer? At this point, I was annoyed too. Then call a wizard. You can verify my words with magic. In truth, there was never any need for such a long conversation in the first place. Only a spell would reveal the truth. However, the idiot detective just smiled as if I wasn't worth the effort. Only adventurers of level 7 or higher can make a formal verification request to the guild. Damn, since when has that changed? 9th level adventurers weren't even being treated like human beings. Even if I pay the fee, this is money that will go to the state when you die. We can't let you waste it on something useless. Nonsense. I knew it was just because they would have less money to steal from me. Now, just admit to the crime. It seemed like it would take some time to prove my innocence. As if celebrating the end of her 15-day stay in the labyrinth, the dazzling sunlight enveloped her body like a cloak. Erwin stood there for a moment to enjoy the warmth. Fragments of memories filled her head, perhaps because of the stark contrast between her surroundings and the environment she had been in moments before. I didn't know the 3rd floor would be so difficult. Erwin had gone up to the 3rd floor with her sister. There, she had experienced the strength of level 7 monsters for the first time. Even though her sister had practically fought them alone, even the level 6 monsters they had encountered by chance at the end, it had truly been the first expedition she had been on that felt like a real adventure. Her trip to the labyrinth with Mr. Barbarian hadn't been bad either, but at the time, she was so focused on getting out alive that she hadn't paid attention to anything else. He's going to be so surprised when I tell him about this. She wanted to find him immediately so she could tell him about her experience in the labyrinth and ask about his as well. Just thinking about it revived her tired body. If I tell him I've obtained a new essence, will it be like last time? The thought was a little unsettling, but, for some reason, her steps were lighter than usual as she hurried toward the currency exchange for 9th level adventurers. Maybe we've lost each other this time. I don't see him around here. That's 184,100 stones. Wow, that's a lot of money for a 9th level adventurer. Because I went with my sister. What's her name? Daria Whitember de Terja. Okay, that's correct. You can go. After exchanging her mana stones, meeting her sister outside, unpacking at the inn, taking a 3-hour bath, and changing her clothes, she headed straight for Bjorn's inn. But how did things end up like this? You're that elf girl who comes by here every day. But, oops, room 302 still hasn't come back. Oh, really? Bjorn wasn't at the inn. What could have happened? His room had already been paid for in advance, and there was other luggage left in it as well. Are you going to keep waiting? Yes, I'm sure he'll be back soon. Tisk. The innkeeper, who was usually kind, clicked his tongue in displeasure. How much time had passed since then? The sun had already set, and it had been a few hours since then. Excuse me, why are you removing Mr. Barbarian's things from his room? Hey, move it, Wait, miss, do you have any documents? D. Documents. You know, a certificate stating that you know that Barbarian, or that he agreed to hand over his souvenirs to you, or something like that. I don't have any, but, wait. What do you mean by giving away your souvenirs? The labyrinth has been closed for a long time, but he hasn't returned. Why else would he not be here? He clearly died in the labyrinth. Finally, the innkeeper somewhat forcibly ejected her. Erwin crouched down in front of the inn. Dead. That's impossible. That was absurd. No matter how common it was for adventurers to die in the labyrinth, it was impossible for her to imagine that he had died. So she stayed there and waited until morning came, then night, and then morning again. I've been looking for you. Her sister came looking for her. She didn't scold her for not coming home for 2 days, nor did she ask any other questions. She simply reached out her hand. Let's get something to eat. Erwin took her hand and stood up. Then, she had a thought. She didn't know the exact reason, and she knew it had nothing to do with her, but I want to be strong. For some reason, that was what she was thinking at that moment. More intensely than ever before, I was trapped in a thick iron cage. All my belongings had been taken away, and I was wearing only a piece of cloth rolled up and tied below my waist. I was currently leaning against the wall for the second consecutive day. Oh, what a shitty life. After the first day, the situation only worsened. In response to my repeated denials and requests for magical verification, the investigator had no choice but to summon a mage, but your spirit attribute is greater than 90. You have resistance to spiritual magic due to your increased magic resistance. The magic of the level 9 mage who worked at the guild didn't work on me. His mental barriers are very thick. It seems we need to call a wizard from the magic tower. The situation was becoming even more complicated. Even from the guild's point of view, the help of a high-level mage would inevitably be necessary to resolve my case. It makes no sense to call someone here for a case involving a rank 9 adventurer. Since then, the investigator has thrown all sorts of nonsense at me to get a confession from me. He probably thought that was the easy way out. But there was no way I was going to make a false confession just because that bastard was trying to intimidate me. I even mentioned the level 6 mage, Arua Raven, and the dwarf, but the frustrating idiot didn't even listen. The case began to drag on when, ha ha ha, Bjorn Yandel, apparently this isn't the first time you've committed an act of looting. A completely new accusation has been made against me, unrelated to anything in the previous investigation. What are you talking about? We discovered this while investigating your case. This was nothing less than a message stone that the investigator held with a triumphant look in his eyes. Message stones have a unique serial number, so each owner is registered. So, I looked up the number on the stone in your backpack, and lo and behold, it belongs to a dead adventurer. Incidentally, the owner's name was apparently Ardo Acertan. Since they were registered under a union, I did some investigating, and they told me everything you did. It wasn't enough just to run away after injuring Hearts Young. You also killed the person who was chasing you, right? This idiot seemed to think he was the main character in a detective novel, so his explanations were unnecessarily long. I cut him off and got straight to the point. So what's going to happen to me? No matter what I said here, that jerk was desperate to end my case and wouldn't bother listening. Now that we have context, testimony, and evidence, the guild has decided to reject your request for verification and execute the sentence. The guild, I know, of course. He probably rejected my request himself. So, how much time do I have? What strange words you use. Raftania's law has never been tolerant of plunderers. Oh, is that so hard for a barbarian to understand? The bastard smiled and continued. This means you will receive the death penalty. And that's what transpired last night. Then, this morning, the guard came to tell me the date of my execution and asked if there was anything I wanted to eat. It was at that moment that I finally realized the mess I was in. If I did nothing, I really was going to die. So, I needed to do something. Unfortunately, the time for resolving the problem with words had already passed. But if I escaped from my cell and left, I would become nothing more than a looter who had escaped from prison. I might be able to escape to the city, but I'll quickly become a wanted criminal. I thought about it for a while, but in the end, there was only one way to survive this. I had to prove my innocence somehow. It wouldn't be easy, of course. In fact, you could judge a forest by its trees. If a mere investigator was so uncommunicative, how could I expect the rest of the guild to be any different? Whether I'm guilty or not, the adventurers' guild will decide that it's easier and quieter for me to simply disappear. With that thought in mind, I drew up a plan, and something like a path began to open up before me. First and foremost, the key was to create a situation where the adventurers' guild couldn't silence me. And in terms of how to do that, I had an idea. Of course, I would have to go through a lot of problems in return. Crunch. I imagined the expression on the investigator's face to motivate myself even more. From a young age, I was a precocious child who knew how to get revenge with my words. No matter how I look at the situation, simply saving my own skin won't be enough. I'm going to make them pay for this. You launched meat explosion. The total price. Chapter 39. Guild 4/5. Open hollow corner bracket translator. Mr. Rhodey close hollow corner bracket. Master, what do you mean? Going to the guild, so suddenly? You mentioned that you needed to visit the guild to look for someone anyway, right? Yes, but, Arua Raven, a 6th level mage associated with the magic tower, had a sour expression on her face as she hesitated. It was true that she had guild business, but she had planned to first take some time to get a proper rest and then conduct preliminary research on the things she had obtained on her expedition. The branch manager made an official request for help. From what I've heard, something big happened in the guild. Wouldn't it be worth earning some extra money? Okay, I'll go. Raven reluctantly agreed. She really needed to go through the guild soon anyway. And if she went now, she could receive a cash reward as well, so there was no reason to delay. I spent a lot of money on the maze this time too. Furthermore, it wouldn't be bad to find that Barbarian a little sooner than she had planned. After all, they had experienced an unprecedented variant rift, and he was the one who had absorbed the Guardian's essence. He was as interesting as the thing she had found. Then I'll be back soon. Oh, take Tarzine with you. Okay, he's practically useless anyway. Raven used the teleportation gate on the first floor of the tower to teleport to the gate closest to the guild branch building. From there, it would take her about 10 minutes to reach her destination on foot. As soon as she stepped onto the street, however, she frowned. Why are there so many people? It seemed significantly more crowded than usual, and the closer she got to her destination, the more people there were, making it difficult even to walk forward. It seemed like something truly big had happened. He said that the branch manager had officially requested assistance. Raven let out a deep sigh. This was just a way to earn some extra money, but for some reason, she had a feeling she would have to work hard for it. Raven grabbed the nearest, most approachable spectator. Excuse me, can I ask you something? What's going on here? The answer she received from the man made her doubt her hearing. A large number of looters who were imprisoned in the branch's dungeon escaped. This was truly unprecedented. Not only had there been a prison break, but some of them even managed to escape to the city center. One of the instigators even reportedly took the district chief's daughter hostage, who happened to be passing by the branch office. I think whoever it is brainless. There's no way the guild can negotiate with them because of that. In truth, whether they wanted to negotiate or not, the guild didn't have the authority to do so in the first place. The royal family of Raftania granted the guild considerable power over matters related to the labyrinth, but they followed a strict code when it came to punishing looters. If that person had simply escaped like the other prisoners, they might have had a small chance of surviving. But you see, the situation has become interesting. What do you mean? The person responsible for the hostage situation is claiming that they were wrongly framed. Incriminated. That's right. All he's asking is for the guild to bring the parties involved together and use magic to reveal the truth fairly and clearly in front of everyone. He wasn't asking to be exonerated. The guilty party was simply demanding that the truth be verified. Because of this, suspicion was spreading among the assembled crowd that he was telling the truth. What kind of crazy person would do something like that? Sure, if the story she heard was true, the first person to blame would be the investigator who had mishandled the case. But to instigate a large-scale prison break and, in the process, take the district chief's daughter hostage. That was definitely not something a sane person would do. Anyway, that's why everyone's waiting here. The branch manager requested help from the tower, but, tisk. Who knows when they'll arrive? Raven smiled awkwardly as she watched the spectators click their tongues. Now she knew for sure. The wizard they were waiting for was her. Raven took a deep breath and recited a spell. Batuna Corvir. Her body began to float in the air while a blue light blossomed beneath her feet. Madam, are you a sorceress? Raven flew over the crowd and landed on the third-floor terrace of this adventurer's guild branch. And the man she saw there left her stunned. Bjorn, Yandel, why was he here? Since the district chief's daughter was being held hostage, the matter was being dealt with promptly. This is Koldo Bierman, the man you asked for. He was unconscious down there, just as you said. Thank you, said the branch manager. You may leave. The first to arrive was Investigator Balofo. To clarify, he was still passed out. That wouldn't look good to any witness, so I pushed him into a closet for the time being. After a short wait, my second delivery arrived. Wait, guild or not, you can't intimidate me like that. The name of this male explorer in his 20s, with an awkward gait, was Hearts Young, the idiot who had lost his masculinity trying to mess with Erwin. Thank you for taking care of it without asking questions. You can go downstairs. Yes sir. Are you the branch manager? Aye. The moment the employee came down the stairs, I jumped out from behind the door and shoved my fist into the idiot's face. Smack. A punch couldn't alleviate my anger, however. If the investigator was the main contributor to the situation reaching this point, the second contributor was that bastard. If it weren't for that man's false testimony, the investigator would have no excuse to sentence me to death. Ah, what are you doing? Who are you? Shut up. I'm not finished. 1, 2, 3 punches. As I continued to punch my fists into his face one after another, Hart's Young passed out while bubbles of blood oozed from his mouth. That didn't look so good either, so I put it in the cupboard as well. Although it was a bit cramped thanks to the investigator's fat mass, it shouldn't be a problem. The more I looked at them, the better they looked together. While I admired the view, the branch manager spoke cautiously. What do you want? Oh, I hadn't told him yet. But I thought, there was no need to explain the whole situation twice. After all, when the next delivery arrived, everything would become obvious. With that in mind, I decided to say nothing. However, sir, it will be difficult to bring a priest here. The key component of this plan, the priest, was missing. The reason was that the priest officially associated with this branch was currently absent. It was also impossible to summon another priest. This might be the adventurers' guild, but not even they could simply call upon a priest who served the gods as if he were a friend from the street. Even at the branch manager's request, it would take at least a day for one to arrive. In this universe, priests were nobles. Not in terms of title, but in how they acted. Suddenly, I had a bitter taste in my mouth. How come nothing ever goes the way I want? I wanted to handle this matter as discreetly as possible. If the branch manager had heard me say this, however, he probably would have called it a lie considering the mess I had made so far. But while I could explain the prison break as some kind of accident, what about the fact that the guild had sentenced an innocent 9th-level adventurer to death? The moment this became known to the outside world, the adventurers' guild's reputation would be ruined. First of all, they claim to be an organization that protects adventurers. That's why I had asked for a priest. If I could prove my innocence in front of a priest, I could resolve things relatively discreetly. And that way, the adventurers' guild wouldn't dare try to cover it all up. But my plan had been thwarted from the start. Thank you for letting me know. Go downstairs. Yes, sir. Please let me know if you need anything else. As I listened to the guild employee's footsteps walking away, I finished my deliberation. If it's impossible to bring a priest here to be my witness, I had no choice but to expand the playing field even further. Only then would the adventurers' guild be unable to silence and kill me. So, of all the ideas that came to mind, I chose the most radical and effective one. Ah, what are you doing? As I stepped onto the terrace with a sword pointed at the district chief's daughter, I realized that people had gathered in the streets. They seemed to be spectators who had come together because of the prison break. One of them saw me and shouted, "Look, the culprit is up there." The crowd's attention immediately focused on me. Ahem. After clearing my throat once, I screamed using the gifted vocal cords of a barbarian. My name is Bjorn Yandel, a 9th-level adventurer whom the guild tried to frame and kill. I swear by the gods that I am innocent. The reactions came immediately. Who is this guy? Did he escape from prison? It didn't matter if they believed me or not. As long as I'd thrown out the bait, more curious people would soon join the crowd. This might be the adventurers' guild, but not even they could bury something they'd all witnessed unfold in real time. Now, I just needed to wait until the wizard arrived, and instead of a shield that was little more than a piece of metal. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. I would make good use of the district chief's daughter as a shield. How long had it been since the prison escape? What? Why are you here, Mr. Yandel? I didn't know the tower was going to send you. As the conversation between an unknown man and woman reached his ears, Koldo Bierman opened his eyes. The place where he was completely dark, and his body was motionless. What is this? Am I locked in? Why? Ignoring the headache that was beginning to creep in, he searched his memories. There were some recollections that immediately came to mind. The prisoners were rebelling and escaping from their cells. He had fled from them and locked himself in the interrogation room. And then a barbarian had broken down the door and punched him in the face. Oh, but what happened after that? He didn't know. He had no idea at all. So he focused on what he could hear. If you were able to hear about what happened outside, it means the news is spreading quickly. Fast or not, what are you thinking? Mr. Yandel, do you think you have multiple lives or something? If I had more than one, I wouldn't be doing this. Mr. Yandel, what was that? Was that the barbarian out there? That's enough. Quickly perform your magic. Only if you promise to do me a favor afterwards. I don't know what you want, but if it's within my capabilities. All right, you promised. Dirte Narvas. Huh, why isn't it working? Mr. Yandel, do you have an item that gives you a psychological barrier? You can't tell just by looking at me that I don't have one of those things. I guess I have no choice but to wake these guys up, then. Do you know how to use video memory magic? Yes, you want me to record everything from now on, right? The more he listened to the conversation, the more confused he became. But then, suddenly, the space around him expanded and his center of gravity shifted. He fell with a thud and hurriedly raised his head. He was in the branch manager's office on the third floor, a place he himself had never even entered more than a few times. What, you're already awake? A total of 4 people were watching him. The barbarian and the branch manager, a woman he presumed to be a sorceress, and a woman who looked quite aristocratic. He didn't know what was happening, but decided to begin immediately. Branch manager, this is the guy. This guy led the prison break. I already know that. You know. His mind went blank for a moment. He didn't understand. If he knew that this man had committed such a horrific crime, why was he just sitting there watching? I heard you were in charge of investigating this man, said the branch manager. Is that true? Yes, that's true. It was then that he sensed the heavy tension in the air. He could tell because it was his job as an investigator to read the atmosphere. He knew things were definitely not looking good for him right now. This barbarian, no, Mr. Yandel here, is claiming that you accused him of being a looter using inconclusive evidence. What do you have to say about that? That's ridiculous. Those words, they better be true. Otherwise, you won't just lose your job by the end of this. What do you mean? He's just a 9th level adventurer. Watch your words. How can a guild member judge someone by their ranking? Excuse me. Bierman froze completely at the thunderous roar. Why was this man, who had always been the first to despise low-ranking adventurers, suddenly acting like this? As if he were aware of the stares upon him now. On second thought, they must have mentioned something about video memory magic. Apparently, the conversation they were having was being recorded in the crystal ball that the sorceress was holding. Ahem. As someone who judges right from wrong, you know that all guild activities must be carefully and perfectly conducted. Tell me how you arrived at your verdict. Coming to his senses, he recited the contents of the investigation as instructed by the branch manager. He was beginning to think that this was the only way to survive this. First, there were the mana stones. At the checkpoint, he presented a number of mana stones that far exceeded the average income of a 9th level adventurer. Since this was suspicious, his backpack was checked and appeared to contain stolen equipment. So what? The investigation results were inconclusive, as we were unable to confirm what actually happened. Because no magic worked on him. So, based on what did you decide that Mr. Yandel was a looter? Due to a separate incident, a message stone was found among his belongings. We tracked down the original owner and were able to obtain a statement from a member of the owner's guild that Bjorn Yandel had murdered an innocent person and stolen his belongings. The more details of the investigation he recounted, the more confidence filled his voice. He didn't know why the branch manager treated him as if he had done something wrong, but there must have been a misunderstanding. Sir, there were no flaws in my verdict. If you suspect I may have lied, you can use magic to prove it. I'm already doing that. Everything he's said so far is true, confirmed the sorceress, who had been watching quietly. However, the ignorant barbarian spoke, with a mocking tone. All you have is the testimony of a member of the same group. It hasn't been confirmed by magic, or is it conclusive? Is what Yandel says true? That's true, but why didn't you investigate? The branch manager's voice suddenly turned cold again. But Bierman had an excuse for that too. First of all, this barbarian's physiology is a problem. Knowing that magic wouldn't work on him, he cooperated and gave false testimony. False testimony? What exactly do you mean by that? Bierman responded confidently. At one point, he claimed he survived a stab wound to the neck. But there was no scar, so I asked him about it, and you know what he said. You'll be amazed. The scar disappeared after he absorbed the essence of a vampire in the rift. Did he absorb the essence of a vampire? Yes, sir. How ridiculous. A vampire. In a rift on the first floor. From beginning to end, this barbarian said nothing but nonsense. Spitting out a new lie to cover up an old one. That's a classic sign that the person giving the testimony is a criminal. How could I just listen to this man and give extra work to our precious city mages for no reason? Of course, while listening to the barbarian's repeated claims of innocence, he admitted that there were times when Bierman wondered if there was really any truth to those claims. But he decided it wouldn't matter. After all, what would be the worst thing that could happen if an innocent barbarian who had just completed his coming-of-age ceremony were to die an unjust death? Besides, if I had called a magician, I would have had less money for myself. Still, it was a bit of luck in the midst of an unfortunate situation. Seriously, a vampire on the first floor. If that ridiculous statement reached the crowd, everyone would be convinced he'd made the right decision. You should have invented a more convincing lie. He looked up at the barbarian with triumph in his eyes. But the feeling didn't last long. But it's true, Raven said simply. Their gears stopped turning at the sorceress's words. Like this. Well, I was there, but, well, I can't exactly cast a spell on myself. What on earth is that sorceress talking about? Chapter 40. Guild 5/5. Open hollow corner bracket translator. Mr. Rhodey close hollow corner bracket. The investigator panicked and opened his mouth. What do you mean? No matter how familiar you may be with this man, you mustn't cover for him. He wasn't saying that because he didn't believe her, though. It seemed more like he just wanted to ignore the truth. However, her reaction was harsh. Are you saying I'm lying? Oh, no, that's not what I meant. You see, so what? Using your insignificant position to investigate adventurers makes even mages seem inferior to you now. A wizard from the magic tower was essentially a semi-noble, largely because, although there were several different schools of magic, they were united as a group and fiercely protected their own rights and interests. The problem here was that the investigator, a low-ranking official, had dared to doubt the veracity of his words. The branch manager couldn't simply stand by and cautiously inserted himself into the conversation. How about we give him a break? You probably have information he doesn't, and without context, the idea sounds absurd. She nodded in acknowledgement. Certainly, there is no precedent for a vampire sighting in a rift on the first floor. Unlike when she dealt with the investigator, there was a friendly smile on her lips as she spoke with the branch manager. He was only there for a very short time, however. Thank you for saying that. There was barely a pause before sharp criticisms escaped his lips. But from the moment the labyrinth was created until today, it has been a center of all sorts of strange phenomena. But, absurd, is that something someone from the Adventurers Guild, much less a branch manager, should be saying? Was this what it meant to be a mage? Not even the position of branch manager of the guild seemed to matter to her. Thus, the branch manager was promptly silenced after his futile attempt to intervene. Knock knock. A banging sound was heard. It wasn't polite. Before anyone could even let them in, the door slammed shut. Are you the Barbarian? Who are you? My name is Niall Urbans. Two men entered the room, a middle-aged man wearing a tailored suit and a young man who appeared to be escorting him. District Chief, Father Julian, who was currently being held hostage, and the branch manager opened their mouths at the same time. Meanwhile, I raised my guard again after having lowered it. So, even the district chief is here. The structure of a guild was simple. Each of the hundreds of branches in the city had a branch manager, and there were 13 district chiefs who oversaw them. The only person above them was the guild master, so the 13 district chiefs were essentially the guild's second in command. There was no doubt that they were powerful figures that a mere level 9 adventurer could never hope to encounter. But the world didn't always work out the way you wanted, even for people like these guys. I heard you caused quite a nasty commotion. As the district chief's disapproving gaze fell upon me, I smiled. Unpleasant, huh? Yeah, that would probably be unpleasant for you. If only Hart's Young hadn't given that false testimony. Actually, even if he had, only if the investigator hadn't been greedy and had handled the case properly. No, if only the Adventurers Guild were an association that properly managed its employees, then I wouldn't have had to go through all this trouble. But they didn't do any of that. This must be something very insignificant to you. But it wasn't for me. For me, my life was at stake. Is that why you caused all this madness? Insanity, I asked. Is it insane to want to live? Well, wasn't there another way you could have dealt with this? You went too far. Another way, my ass. Even I broke through those iron bars and got here. The branch manager didn't even know I existed within his branch. And that was also the case for this district chief, who undoubtedly had a say in changing the guild's internal rules so that investigations of level 9 adventurers could be carried out based solely on suspicion. If you had done things right, none of this would have happened, he said in a low, cold tone. At that exact moment, the branch manager intervened. How dare you speak like that in front of the district manager? The bastard investigator and the district chief's bodyguard also looked at me as if they were looking at a madman. Well, to those guys, I was no different from a madman. A misfit among misfits who couldn't be explained by logic alone. The district chief sighed and changed his expression. What is your name, sorceress? Arua Raven. Okay, Ms. Raven, how much would you sell me that crystal ball for? However you looked at it, he was suggesting a cover-up. I didn't expect him to do it so openly, though. For a moment, my heart sank. I refuse your offer. What a shame. You're not going to try to take it by force, are you? The district chief immediately flashed a nonchalant smile. Ha ha, of course not. I don't plan on receiving a visit from the head of your school. He looked around. Why is everyone so tense? It was just a joke. With all those people outside waiting to see how this ends, why would I dare do something like that? Just kidding, my butt. Cold sweat ran down my spine. That's why I had tried to bring a priest. Video memory or not, mages could be bribed multiple times to suit their own interests. If I hadn't known Raven, she would have been successfully bribed by the district chief. Regardless of the crowd gathered outside, I would have died here. In any case, the outcome of this situation wasn't bad. Raven resisted, and now not even the district chief would be able to use his power to cover it up. In other words, now I just needed to prove my innocence. Anyway, we've reached the end of this mess. Okay, how about we finish this now? I approached the closet and woke Hearts Young, who was sleeping inside. What is this? Why am I here? There were audible gasps all around. This, of course, because the moment it was confirmed that this guy had given false testimony, things were really going to get unpleasant for everyone. This man is lying. The moment Raven spoke, a heavy silence fell over the room. What are you going to do now, District Chief, sir? Bjorn Yandel, I believe that's your name, right? You are innocent. It's a shame I can't thank you for that, I replied to the District Chief's forced smile. This time, even the branch manager, who was right next to me, didn't dare comment on my tone. He just stood there trembling, his eyes fixed on the district manager's reaction. So, what do you want us to do now? Isn't it obvious? I demand compensation and that they be punished. I understood. The district chief nodded silently as if pressing the buttons on a calculator inside his head, and then opened his mouth. First, the investigator in charge of your case will be fired. Branch manager, I swear to the gods, I conducted the investigation according to protocol. Ellipsis exclamation mark. Are you trying to project your incompetence onto the entire guild? All past decisions you've made will be thoroughly reviewed, and if any injustice is found in the process, you will be punished accordingly. This can't be. The arrogant investigator paled and fell to his knees. Considering how frightened he looked, it seemed he hadn't exactly lived a life of complete integrity. Well, judging by his recent behavior, I wasn't surprised. Please, spare me. Please, you shouldn't be saying that to me, not to him. I thought he was asking for bread from people who don't have bakeries, but I didn't say it out loud. If that idiot had had a little common sense from the beginning, we wouldn't be here. That's how the world worked. Nobody ever regretted hitting the other person. Regret only appeared when it was time to pay the price. So what will happen to this man? I asked, looking at Hearts Young, the supposed witness in this case. The district chief responded without much thought. This man seriously confused the investigation with false testimony to cover up his own guilt. He will be treated accordingly. In the same way, after a thorough investigation, he will be executed. The district chief's words carried a great deal of weight. The investigation hadn't even begun, much less gone to trial, but the fact was that this amounted to a death sentence. No. Then Hearts Young's eyes rolled back and he fainted, but nobody paid him any attention. I hope you investigate the group this guy belongs to while you're at it. If it's the Crystal Union, they have a reputation for many things. I'll do as you say. The district chief readily agreed to my request. I was beginning to think he was a pretty clever guy. This meant he had clearly recognized that he had no choice but to give in to my demands. So, is that punishment enough? Good. As I hesitated, staring into space, the branch manager met my gaze and quickly looked away. I smiled and nodded. Asking for more here would be excessive on my part. Thank you for being so considerate of our situation. There was nothing to be thankful for. I planned to receive what I deserved for it in a different way. Okay then, now that the punishment part is over, we should talk about compensating you for the mistake we made. Is there anything you'd like? I'll decide after I hear from you. First, I'm going to raise your level to level 7. A level upgrade, huh? That's not bad. Once I became a level 7 adventurer, the currency exchange line would be less crowded, and there would be many other benefits. For example, if I weren't level 9, that idiot investigator wouldn't have been so arrogant from the start. District Chief, sir, you're promoting an adventurer with only 2 months of experience to level 7 all at once. The branch manager added that he was concerned about potential legal problems that might arise in the future, but the district chief stubbornly shook his head. We are apologizing to this man now, so don't disagree with me about that. All good. The district chief was acting exactly like a politician offering a sincere apology, especially given his empty words. Just a moment. This is a little strange, isn't it? Just as I was about to open my mouth, Raven, who had been standing there quietly, joined the conversation first. I was nervous about what she was going to say this time, but she didn't seem to care at all. How can a level upgrade be considered compensation? Isn't it already the guild's job to reward adventurers with specific skills by increasing their level? But, according to what we've just heard, this man is still a beginner. What does that matter? This is unprecedented. Of course it's unprecedented, Raven said. Having already interrupted the district chief several times, she continued quickly. No other adventurers have consumed the essence of a level 5 monster, a vampire, and a rift guardian within their first 2 months. What are you trying to say? I'm not sure. It seemed a little unfair of you to want a pat on the back for doing something you should already be doing anyway. She turned to me and smiled. Not being naive enough to waste a readily available opportunity, I quickly jumped on the bandwagon. So I guess I'm waiting to hear what the real compensation is now. What do you want? Well, since I've suffered so much, I should receive equal compensation in return. I was about to ask for something, when Raven's mouth opened again. Of course it's money. What more could the adventurers guild do for him? I'm sure that if I had time to think about it, there would be something. receiving free binding magic for life, or permission to post personal ads on the guild's bulletin boards, etc. In truth, all of this is something that money can buy anyway. When I nodded in agreement, the district chief sighed and raised a white flag. How much? Now, all that remained was to write the amount I wanted on the blank check that had been presented to me. I looked at Raven, who now seemed quite trustworthy to me for some reason, and tried to convey that I had faith in her judgment as a mage. Fortunately, it seemed I had gotten my message across because she opened her mouth with a somewhat proud look on her face. How could you almost accidentally execute an adventurer with a bright future ahead of him? She hesitated, then exclaimed, at least 5 million stones. The district chief nodded without saying a word. Okay, it will be paid. I wasn't that surprised. 5 million stones was far beyond my expectations, but, that is, if I were the only one asking for it. Without Raven, the transaction wouldn't have gone so smoothly. Was this the true power of having status? Deeply aware of her influence, I wondered how I could repay Raven for the favor I received today. It was at this point that Raven opened her mouth again. My payment will be another 1,000,000 stones. Payment? What do you mean? If you're talking about your payment for helping us, the amount we agreed upon with the tower is. I'm including the price of this crystal ball that recorded the prank the district chief pulled earlier. It may have been a joke, but I'm sure there are many people who would be interested in hearing it, don't you think? Ha ha ha, what a funny young woman. I'm not kidding. When Raven's expression hardened, the district chief's expression turned stern in response. He didn't need to think for long. All good. He quickly shook his head. He had wasted 1,000,000 stones with a slip of the tongue. I don't think there's any need to pay for your help. We're all wizards like that. Just as I was admiring the way she looked after her own interests, her voice echoed in my head. Thanks to you, I made some money. And upon hearing those words, I thought about something I hadn't thought about regarding someone in a long time. I thought we should hang out together more often in the future.